June 10th, 2026 regular council meeting, and want to just start by respectfully acknowledging the land which you gather is the unceded territory of the Comox First Nation, the traditional keepers of this land. I'm going to just make a proclamation for Myasthenia Gravis Awareness Month in Courtenay. Myasthenia gravis, which is spelled here for me, is a rare autoimmune neuromuscular disease that affects residents in our community. It interferes with communication between nerves and muscles, causing muscle weakness and fatigue. Common symptoms include double vision, weakness in limbs, and difficulty with chewing, swallowing, and breathing. There is no cure, making awareness and support essential to reduce stigma and improve understanding of all those affected. And this is the June is the awareness month. Thanks for that. And I don't believe we have any late items today, so we will move into regular council minutes for May 27th. And are there any errors or omissions? Seeing none, I'll accept those unanimously by council. And we'll go into our first staff report, the reserve fund policy, and I'll pass it over to Mr. Garvin.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. Through you to council, we have in front of you a reserve fund policy 1840.01. This is some long-standing work that has been undertaken in our finance department. It's a council priority. Mr. Langemeyer will introduce this report and answer any questions council may have.
Nice to be here once again, Mayor and Council. So the city has a long history of establishing and using reserves. Through the policy development, the research, discussion, and attending workshops, I've come to the conclusion that we're actually in a very solid place in comparison to some of our friends in other municipalities. What this policy does, it pulls all the city's existing reserves as they've been established by bylaw into one single policy. And this really helps provide a consolidated snapshot of where a reserve sits, what they're used for, contribution methods, and target balances. In the background of the report, I identified that the city is holding $84 million in reserves and DCC funds as at December 31st, 2025. On the surface, this sounds like an incredibly large sum of money. However, once we work through the reserve fund the reserves by fund, so general, water, and sewer, then we break it down by type, the statutory and discretionary, and then getting even closer on how it's used, an operating reserve, a capital reserve, or a working reserve. Once these items are considered and the individual reserve balances don't seem as unreasonable, it is quite a fair number. I'll get right into it. A statutory reserve is one that's set up and required by a higher level of government. A discretionary reserve is one that can be established by council. You can create a discretionary reserve for any reason. Breaking that down further, you can identify reserves by operating, capital, or working. An operating reserve is really used to smooth out those operational changes. A good example is the snow and ice control or the police contingency reserve. Capital reserve is used for acquisition of capital assets. The city's sustainable infrastructure investment funds flow into our asset management reserve, which is a capital reserve. And then we have working reserves. These are used to cover the near-term or immediate cash flow needs of the city. Since the municipality essentially gets paid once a year at tax time, part of the year we are sitting on a lot of cash, and the other part of the year we're really drawing on our reserves to meet the daily needs of cash flow operations. What the policy really identifies within the body of it is the purpose of each reserve, the typical funding source, as the reserves all have different possible funding sources. A number of the reserves are funded through taxation or fees, and those are authorized by council in the financial planning process. Some reserves are more reactionary, like the land sale reserve. Council doesn't typically budget to put money into the land sale reserve, but if the municipality sells land, any proceeds must go into reserve. And then we have operational savings like the snow and ice. If in 1 year we've budgeted more than we've spent in snow and ice, a portion of those savings go into that reserve for future use. In the policy, we identify the minimum and optimum balances. At times, these balances are identified because they make sense. At other times, there is no optimum or minimum balance required. And then we identify the rationale and how we came to those balances. I do want to draw attention into the report to the additional reserve detail section. As going through, I found that a lot of the information in the policy and a lot of the reserves fundamentally made sense. It was self-explanatory. I wanted to highlight the machinery and equipment. It is one of the oldest reserves. I think the earliest bylaw I found was established in about 1930. It's been amended over the years and updated. It's one we use to buy our machinery equipment. Typically, we only fund replacement equipment out of the machinery and equipment reserve. If we're buying a net new asset, it would be funded through taxation or another source. The new works reserve is the city's most challenging reserve because it was essentially used as the catch-all reserve. It contains our community building funds. It contains the 3 different streams of GHG related funding, plus 16 additional subcategories. So it is a bit of a monster to deal with. One of the pieces I want to identify is upon adoption of this policy, I want to come back to council with further work to clarify and make the new works reserve more functional for what our needs are. At the time, some of those categories were important, but times have changed. The affordable housing and the MRDT reserve identified as we have changes in OAP funds and we have changes to the MRDT. The MRDT reserve will continue with the regionalized MRDT, as it is expected that OAP funds will flow to the individual municipalities, and we are statutorily required to have a reserve for that. On that note, I want to identify that council has given direction to use OAP funds for affordable housing. However, we do not transfer OAP funds into the affordable housing reserve because they must stay in the MRDT reserve. I wanted to identify those two because those are ones that have been questioned in the past, and you may see, why is the MRDT reserve so big? Why is the affordable housing reserve maybe not as big as it could be? And these are the reasons why. The big change that the policy brings is giving direction on how to use the operating surplus. Historically, the operating surplus has been addressed through the financial planning process on a year-by-year basis. By giving policy direction on optimum and target balances, this will really allow staff to make different recommendations or more focused recommendations with regards to the use of those surplus funds. And finally, I want to draw attention to attachment 4, the major reserve continuity schedules. This is what I found really powerful to see what is the benefit, what are the reserves doing for the city. There are only 5 reserves mentioned here, as these are the city's major reserves that see the most transactions, the most amount of money going in and the most amount of money flowing out. And you can look at some of those attachments and see just the sheer volume of projects. I want to draw your attention to the machinery equipment reserve. So at the end of 2026, it's actually projected to be in a deficit balance, and that's caused by the budgeted purchase of 2 fire trucks. Now, these fire trucks, we order them, but we don't pay for them until they're actually delivered, and delivery is expected to be in 2028. So that's when the cash will actually leave that reserve. So it is a balance of understanding where our contributions are, when our council authorized spending occurs, and where that future balance can be. Another one I wanted to identify is a park amenity reserve. This one's a challenging one because the money is flowing into the reserve due to development within the municipality. Looking at the 5th year, you see we're moving into a deficit balance. We also notice there are no contributions recorded, as we don't have solid confirmed development. We can't forecast that. So at times it is reasonable to say, you know what, given the historic amounts going into that reserve, it is reasonable that we'll have an adequate cash on hand to pay for that project in 5 years from now. And then the final one is the asset management reserve. This is where the sustainable infrastructure investment funds flow. And you can see just the total number of projects being funded or partially funded from that reserve. And as the SIP funds move through this policy and the guidance by council, it really ensures that the municipality will have funding to address the replacement of existing infrastructure. You know, if you look at those number of projects, if you were to ask me 5 years ago, do you think that'll exist? I don't know if I would have been able to answer that clearly. The attachment really shows the value of consistent policy guidance, establishing, and then really relying on that long-term planning. You know, the asset management work and looking out what is the next 5 years going to look like. It'll be amazing to see the amount of work that can get done and the amount of project can be funded from that. And with that, I'm open to questions.
Thank you. I'll look to council online as well as in the room if there are any questions or comments. Councillor McCollum.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor, and thanks so much for the presentation and the report. It's great to see this coming to council, and overall, I'm really pleased with what's in front of us. And I think basically what we're looking at here is, for a large part of this, is just really a formalization of processes that we've been doing through our 5-year financial planning process over, you know, the last successive 4 years, and getting this formalized into a policy and providing some, you know, framework for future decision making, and just having clear guidance on how we're doing things, I think is just really important housekeeping. And so I'm really appreciating seeing this come around, especially toward the end of our term when we've spent a good deal of time talking about this. And yeah, I just want to say that I think this work reflects my expectations around what I was expecting in terms of what this policy would look like. I do have like a few questions kind of more on the more granular aspects of it, which may not surprise you entirely. I guess my first question is just on reviewing this policy. I think it's really important going forward that future councils see it and review it. We have so much policy that's related to the work that we do, and not a lot of it doesn't necessarily get looked at very carefully because it just exists, and we assume that staff are carrying out policy, and it doesn't necessarily serve to have that come back around to council to make it clear why we're doing the things that we're doing, and things do change over time. So I'm wondering if it would make sense, or if there's a reason why it's not included, just a regular review as part of the policy, that it gets presented and reviewed. I think we have that with our council procedures. I think we have it in a couple of our policies that there is a regular review component to it. And so I just would like to hear your thoughts on whether or not that would make sense, especially given that it's new. I think it could probably use you know, a second look at some point after it's been in place for a budget cycle or two. Oh, do I have to take mine off?
That sounds absolutely reasonable. I suspect through the financial planning process, there'll be reference to the reserve policy quite often. And so it'll give a natural reminder that the policy exists, and that with the guidance in the policy, the staff will bring it back if something isn't working anymore, or we have a reserve that isn't doing what it could be doing.
Excellent. Thanks for that, Councillor McCollum. And we have Councillor Cole Hamilton online.
There we go.
Okay.
Thanks so much.
That was us.
No, it was all on my end. Thanks so much for this, Adam, and I appreciate the overview that it provides for us. And I was wondering if you could possibly step back, like sort of one or two steps, and provide some context for people who may be watching? May not be many of them, but reserves are obviously a huge part of our financial picture. And I feel that over the last two terms, there's been an effort to really focus on the long-term future of the city and make sure we're ready for it financially by building up reserves. Do you want to make any kind of statement of context to where we find ourselves as we implement this new policy in terms of our kind of robustness of our reserves now versus say 4 or 8 years ago?
Yeah, it's a fair question. So, well, so that is a fair question. And I may not have hit on it as much as I should have, but the city has a good history of using reserves, establishing them, and following through with them. What I think may not be communicated as clearly, and what this policy will really help with, is that one document that captures all the reserves and some of the background that isn't included in the reserve establishment bylaws. So the city, comparatively to 8 years ago, I think our change in how this policy will work is continuing to provide information and the reminder to the public and the guidance to council to continue the importance of the reserve contributions.
Mhm.
Further, the identification of policy guidance regarding operational surplus will be very powerful at the financial planning time. Historically, it's been kind of a year by year approach of where our optimum balance should be in our surpluses. You know, what else should we be doing with those funds that may now, with this policy guidance, be surplus to the surplus? And so with that, it'll really help future financial plans and staff bring forward recommendations that now have some guidance from this policy.
All right. Thank you. That's I was curious as to whether there were any figures which would sort of look at the relative health of the overall reserves over the course of 4 or 8 years up until now, but those may not be readily at hand. Thanks very much.
I don't know. Thanks very much for that. Next, we have Councillor Hillian online.
Thanks, Mayor, and thanks, Adam, for the presentation. Two questions. First of all, you mentioned that in relation to policy, not many other municipalities have this sort of policy. I'm just wondering if you can give us any sort of comparison between our reserves, the amount we have in reserve for various functions versus other municipalities. Would you say that this is common practice? Are we ahead of the curve or behind in some categories? That's the first question. The second question is, I think it's always helpful when we're talking about reserves to speak about them in relation to taxation and what the policy says about use of reserve funds to basically augment the taxation that is imposed on the community. I believe your report speaks to that, but I think it'd be helpful if you just reiterated that. Thanks.
Thank you. Through the mayor, I'll take the first question. So thank you for the question, Councillor, but we can't really compare ourselves to other municipalities and the levels of their reserves. And Mr. Langemeyer can weigh in if you'd like. It's a little bit challenging because we don't know the specific circumstances, whether they've recently accessed their reserves and that's why they're less. I just would say difficult, particularly if we're thinking about in the Comox Valley, et cetera. But so I would defer to my colleague if he had some other commentary as it relates to that.
Maybe, Mr. Garbett, just to clarify, I just want to establish that our approach to reserves is standard procedure for municipalities. It's in fact how municipalities operate, putting money aside for expenditures that are anticipated or unanticipated in order that you're not caught short if something arises.
You're correct in that sense. So I recently attended a workshop with a presentation by a consultant who did a very much, a ton of reserve work in Ontario. Probably about 80% of Ontario municipalities use this consultant for the reserves. The approach that he took and the approach that we have in the municipality for the optimum balance, the rationale, the minimum balance, and how the monies flow in is best practice. At that workshop, there were many municipalities that they had one bylaw that said the municipal reserve. You know, we have a long-standing practice of multiple, which is good because it adds that segregation of the specific funds for those specific uses. Some municipalities had hundreds of different bylaws, and so you end up with a balance of you need your reserve policy and bylaws to provide enough cash on hand to do something. If you get too granular, there's never enough money to actually do the project. But if it's too vague, then it's becomes hard to focus that funding. So with regards to your second question about reserves reducing taxation, reserves help smooth the taxation change. And I believe in the report, I have a really good line that the reserves help aid in the smooth application of services. And that's really what it is. It acts as a buffer. So when an event happens and we need an influx of money, we're not taxing for it in the individual year. We can rely on the reserve to smooth out that tax change. Or if we're saving up for a big capital project, instead of increasing taxation a whole bunch in a single year, we again can smooth it out by accessing the reserve. And it goes both ways. The reserves may not directly reduce taxation because we're saving up for something, but it will smooth the impact of a substantial change.
Thanks for that.
Thanks for the question, Councillor Alien. I'm going to pass it over to Councillor McCollum. Actually, I'll go to Councillor Jolicoeur.
Thanks, Mayor. And also very happy to see this policy come back to us. I think it really kind of pulls together a lot of the conversations we've been having, at least on my term on council, and highlights to the community some of the thinking that we have, and also clearly articulates transparently all the different reserves. And similar to Councillor Hillian, I think it is an important piece of public information so that the public is aware that money is being put aside for projects that are considered through our financial planning process. I do have a question though on Appendix A. And in Appendix A, you've listed out all the reserves, and the majority of them don't actually have a number attached to the minimum and optimum balance, and most of the language is around sufficient to support the near-term projects that fit within that reserve. And I guess my question is, given that at least in the last 3.5 years, it seems like we've done a lot of work in understanding our gaps of infrastructure. I know that we have our DCC projects, we have our integrated rainwater management and flood mitigation analysis. We have all the work being done in the recreation department. We have the work in operations department and the capital team as well, that have articulated some of the costs or the projected costs for at least some of the work and infrastructure gap that we have in the community. And so I guess I was just a little surprised, given that I've been kind of tracking over the last few years that we've been playing catch up and understanding the infrastructure gap that we have, and some of that we've costed out. So I'm wondering, you know, is this meant to be iterative? Is this going to be updated once we understand some of those, maybe from Class E to Class D or Class D to Class C, or is this just something that is going to be, I guess, included internally within staff departments?
That is a very good question. And working through this policy and establishing it, I thought we would have more tangible, specific numbers for the optimum and minimum balances. However, going through it, it really is dependent on the type of reserve. So if we draw our attention to the asset management reserve, one of the things we have to consider is that is a reserve for asset management for sustainable infrastructure investment plan. Is it useful to have money in the reserve, but not spend it on projects? Whereas if we have a target or an optimum balance, really there is no need for an optimum balance, as those funds should be being used as they're brought in or as they're saved slightly to fund that bigger project. So it's really that the churn of money through the reserve. With some of the items, I did not want to put specific minimum or optimums in as they can become dated. And so drawing the attention to the police contingency reserve, that was one that a council updated 2 years ago. And instead of giving a fixed amount being this is the optimum, we used a figure and tied it to the equivalent of the cost of 10 FTE of RCMP officers. And that allows that reserve to grow or shrink with its intended purpose. So I can't answer that we'll see specific numbers, but working through once a policy is established, there are some areas that we could focus more clearly on. I was in a meeting today regarding machinery and equipment. And a piece of it was, what's our approach to how much we fund into the reserve to replace it? Establishing a machinery equipment replacement policy could feed into building more data into this reserve. So answer is very wishy-washy. It's very dependent on the type. And another piece that I want to identify is that one of the goals is to have an effective use of capital. Having cash saved up is not an effective use of capital. Having cash work through that reserve and being spent is effective. So it's that balance.
Excellent. Thanks for that. Next, we have Councillor McCullum.
Yeah, thanks again. Yeah, I had maybe I'll just pick up on what we're talking about in terms of the Appendix A and just trying to flesh out exactly where our target is in terms of specific reserves. And I think that table is actually really helpful because there's a lot of reserves that we have either for statutory purposes or for real specific use that don't have a target. It's they have a specific purpose, but not necessarily a target that is addressed in our financial planning process. So I think that my comments are really around these ones that we have decision-making discretion over, not the other ones that are captured in the policy quite clearly. My challenge is with two aspects. One is that it's because they've been left fairly open for reasons that you've just articulated that do make sense to me, and are also fleshed out in the report. It does make it hard to know if what we're doing in terms of the financial planning process and which is essentially our decision around taxation, is contributing the adequate amount to land somewhere between the minimal and optimal balance. And because it's left open, and so I found that the language for the police contingency reserve is excellent because it's very clear that you can calculate a number from that. And if the contingency tips well over what our target is, then there's a discussion there on how to use that and whether or not it's surplus or meant to fund something else. Not so clear even with ones that should, like in my mind, I thought would be pretty clearly laid out, like the snow and ice control one, for example. It's offset multiple severe winter seasons. So I'm not even sure how many we're talking about or what that would entail. And I thought when we first discussed it that there was, and I'm certain this exists in the background somewhere that there's a calculation around like a rolling average or something. But that's, yeah, not captured. And then, so it makes it harder to know if the contributions are in line with the policy. And reserves are one of the aspects of the financial planning process that I find the contributions to reserves are the hardest thing to tease out. They're the most obscure aspect of our financial planning process because it's very clear to see operationally when an expense is going up, but it's not clear whether or not we're sometimes soaking up some of that expense with something other than taxation. And maybe, yeah, and we do have a lot of these one-time costs. So yeah, just thinking about how it's going to be used going forward. And yeah, some of the language, I think, yeah, the language that we're using, which is again aligned with the discussion that we've had around asset management, but funding aligned with life cycle replacements requirements identified through the asset management plan. It just, I'm not sure how future councils would know if their contributions are doing that. I mean, I'm fairly clear on it because we did adopt the SIP policy. And so even having reference to that there would, you know, provide, I think, more of a framework. But I do worry that there could be very little being contributed toward these reserves in a financial plan. And we could still say that we're meeting these objectives even when we're not, if we're not clear enough on what the ideal is. And so one suggestion that I have is actually bringing in some kind of reporting around this to the financial planning process and saying, you know, here are the ones that have these kind of frameworks, and, you know, through our analysis and our current, you know, financial needs, this is kind of where we would peg these, and this is where we're at, you know, kind of green, orange, or red type of thing. So just wondering if any thought has been given to that. Because yeah, if it's too open, then is it serving a purpose? I guess that's my concern.
Councillor, you hit the nail on the head with the broadness and the challenges of a single approach to all the reserves. So your example of the snow and ice, in the policy, the guidance is vague. If we go to the route establishment bylaw, that identifies, I believe it's half a year's worth of the average snow and ice expense. And then we go back to, well, where does that come from? The way we budget in operations, the snow and ice expense is based on the last few years of average. So we're basing our reserve contributions on, or not even contributions, our target on our reserve establishment bylaw, which is based on an average of our actual operations. So to have a specific dollar value, it doesn't make sense because we have these layers of guidance in there. With regard to the policy and the future financial planning, the policy will really set us up to be able to report to council where we're sitting with all the reserves, and having, we can almost produce the exact appendix to the policy with those color coding if we're good, bad, or out to lunch. But you do notice in a number of them, they are non-budgeted reserves. So there's no tool or method that council can actually budget to put something into the Parks and Amenity Reserve because it's a reactionary reserve from what's happening. With regard to the asset management reserve, and I also want to identify the machinery equipment, those are the ones that have a lot of transactions flowing through them. And the asset management reserve does have policy support that identifies the contributions. It is a good item to bring in that the policy, the reserve policy, could reference that infrastructure investment plan document to strengthen the rationale for that reserve contribution. With regards to the vehicle, machinery, equipment, that's another one that there's room for improvements. And so one of the pieces of the sort of the policy is we're not letting perfection get in the way of progress. This is a first step and working towards it, because then we can identify that, hey, this is a reserve policy that says the machinery equipment reserve should be funded to an amount that is adequate. In future councils, I can say, hey, if you reduce your machinery equipment reserve contributions, you're outside the policy. It's no longer adequate for future needs. So it gives that sort of long-term guidance.
Excellent. Thanks very much. And I think I have Councillor Courtenay. Actually, Councillor Cole Hamilton online.
Great. Thanks very much, Mayor. I had anyway, first of all, thank you. This is a huge piece of work and we've really appreciated receiving it. And had a question, I guess, part of our role with this policy in the future or future councils will be governance. How do we make sure that we are meeting what our policy asks of us? And I realize it's not possible to put dollar amounts or really tight metrics on everything. But I was going to ask you just to expand a bit on 1835, the new works and equipment reserve. And it says capacity to optimal is capacity to fund meaningful share of the ongoing capital program internally and reduce reliance on debt. And I mean, well, I definitely agree to that with that. I'm wondering what we would contemplate as being the range of meaningful, how we would define that kind of know if we're hitting that mark.
Like I identified, the new works reserve is one of the most challenging because
Yeah.
it has so many different small subcategories. Historically, there has been a contribution to the new works reserve specifically towards IT infrastructure and building infrastructure. The overall value was not humongous. It was about $100,000 to $200,000 a year.
Okay.
This reserve has historically been used to help fund net new items. And so this is one of the pieces where I wanted to bring back the reserve for further clarification and guidance to because there are so many small little pots within the reserve that it's not sufficient enough to really achieve what its goals are with regards to some items. So it's a work in progress.
Understandable. And I should say I appreciate you kind of sequencing the tasks rather than trying to do everything and then bring it to us, was to put some pieces sort of out there for further work. So we'll wait for greater definition on that. I have another question, but it's on a different issue. So I'll put my hand down and get back in the queue.
You're being given the wave, so if you want to keep going, Councillor Cole.
Okay. I just had a question about the approach we're taking towards surplus. And I recall in our spring meeting, we talked about a 15%, which is roughly 8 weeks, because we have the ability to borrow from MFA with relative, it's less complex to do bridging loans on things like that, that we're going to go with 15%. And that will be net of other reserves. Like if we have a reserve that already covers something, then we wouldn't include that in the amount of surplus we have to keep back. I see it a bit different in the policy here, and I was wondering if you could just help me understand that.
Your interpretation is correct. The way I would bring this to council next year would be, this is our minimum and optimum balance. I recognize that the optimum balance does slightly exceed council's direction from the 2026 to 2030 financial plan. However, the minimum balance also subsedes the direction from there. So it's really landing in that middle area. With regards to how we would calculate the balance, it is a good approach to not double count those reserves into that surplus balance that we already have the safety net for. And that would be the approach. I don't have more to add to that.
Okay, so in future, like that, the surplus, it will be that net surplus we'll be looking at when the figure comes up.
That is correct.
Okay, great. Thanks, Adam.
Excellent. Thanks very much. And Councillor Gilliker.
Yeah.
I would think I was after Will.
No, it's been up since before, but go ahead, it's fine.
Just as a follow-up to what Councillor Cole Hamilton's question actually is around the operating surplus and the decision and the deliberation that council took over the last few financial planning processes. So starting on page 6 and 7 of the policy, it speaks to the GFOA's suggested government maintain unrestricted operating reserves equivalent to approximately 2 months of operating expenditures, and then goes on to highlight the use of surplus to reduce taxation, etc. Am I missing something? Do we have in the policy the direction around the 15%, the 8 weeks? And if yes, what page is it on? Because I see a lot of languaging here around research and best practice, but not actual policy direction, and maybe I've just missed it in the policy. Thanks.
On the bottom of page 18 and the top of page 19 of the policy identifies the surpluses for general water, and then on top of page 19 is the sewer fund. And identifies the 2 months or 3 months being the optimum target balances.
All right, and Councillor McCollum.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. My question was also around the surplus. And I think at some point in our conversations about surplus policy, I think the mayor's actually brought it up a couple times as well. Just in terms of making a decision around surplus, this year, for example, we're over the target amount, and we use that for taxation reduction from the previous year. Not every year would that necessarily be the decision of council. There might be a reason to use that to fund an underfunded reserve. And I'm wondering if any thought was given to other, because it does specifically say, that it can be used for taxation reduction if it's over. But I wonder if we want to identify like reserves that could possibly benefit from, an additional contribution in times where there's an unexpected windfall. It might not make sense to reduce taxation for one reason or another, like, a big expense coming up in the following year, or I guess I don't really need to lay that out for you. I'm sure you can think of lots of reasons not to do that.
It's a challenging piece to answer because I wanted to leave the reserve policy and the discussion around excess surplus to councils at that time. So by adopting this, we ensure that we have what we really need to continue. If there's something more than that, I really feel like depending on the information at that time, at that financial planning process, that decision can be made. One of the pieces that some municipalities follow is that by default, if there's additional money, it goes into a specific surplus. But what that does, it can erode the importance of consistent established reserve contributions. So if you're always sort of relying on this money that may exist or may not, it takes away the strength of the consistent contribution to a specific reserve. If at the time of the financial plan there is a big project coming along, it could be a recommendation coming from staff. Council could also make that recommendation, but alternatively, a reduction in taxation may be what may be desired. It's really up to those future councils, and I didn't want to provide too much restriction over those funds.
Yeah, so that makes perfect sense. And I guess my comment around that is that if we have, as part of our financial planning process, a check-in around this Appendix A, and kind of if our reserves are more toward the minimum or the optimal, then perhaps that analysis of where we're at with reserves in advance, so the financial plan could maybe inform some of that when there is. I mean, in my time on council, there has been at least 3 or 4 times the growing communities was a good example. COVID restart, like we've had a couple times where there's been like a pretty significant unexpected surplus for reasons completely outside of our control. So yeah, I think if as part of the financial planning process, there's clear communication back to council about what reserves are in great shape and what maybe could use some more support, that might help future decision makers. Thanks.
Excellent. Thanks, Councillor McCollum. And I'll look around to see if there's any other questions, and seeing none, someone would like to move the motion. Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any further questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? And motion carries. And again, really appreciate staff. I know this is a discussion that has been going on for quite some time, I think pre-COVID, but as Councillor McCollum articulated, we've had a few things kind of jump in the way there. Moving on to 4.2.1, the request for 55 plus BC Games support. And I'll maybe pass it over to Ms. Saunders.
Thank you. Through the Mayor to Council. The report in front of you is for Council to consider a request from the Comox Valley Regional District to support a joint bid application with the City of Campbell River for the 2028, 2029, or 2030 55 plus BC Games, and to commit to providing in-kind support of services and facilities should the bid be successful. So on April 28th of this year, the Comox Valley Recreation Commission made a resolution to jointly apply with the City of Campbell River for the games listed. Following that, the CVRD has reached out and requested letters of support, and resolutions from local councils supporting the bid and committing to in-kind resources. The in-kind resources would include the use of facilities over the course of 4 days in August or September of the selected year, as well as some staff time associated with participating in putting the bid package together, as well as in coordinating with the Volunteer Games Board of Directors and the sport representatives to book facilities. There's no sort of additional staff costs expected. It's expected that staff would be able to do this within their normal workflow, recognizing, of course, that there would be impacts to programming and facility access for the general public during the games. Staff are recommending that council support the joint bid, as the 55 plus BC Games would provide an exceptional opportunity to drive economic, tourism, and sport benefit to our community, while also supporting and recognizing the incredible active older adults in our community and across the province. I'm happy to take any questions.
Fantastic. Thanks very much. I'm not seeing any questions, but there is a recommendation. It's been moved and seconded. Any questions or comments? Still seeing none. All those in favor? Any opposed? And motion carries. Thanks for that. Thanks, Ms. Saunders and staff, for moving that forward. On to 4.2.2, what we learned about the Billmore and Dogwood Parks. And again, I'll pass it over to, I believe, Mr. Williams.
It's okay, I'll take it.
Thank you. We're here to report on the project update on the Billmore and Dogwood Park strategic plan. We had currently completed round 1 of the engagement process, and so we're here to report the results of that of all the so included a survey, included pop-up in the park event, and also some focus group sessions. And I'm going to turn over to VDZ. They are here to present those results, and they're online.
Sure. Thank you, Joy. I just want to check that everybody can hear me okay. Can everyone hear me all right?
Okay. Yeah, it's pretty good.
Great. Well, thank you, Mayor and Council, for joining me today to talk about this park. As Joy had mentioned, I work for Van Zam and Associates, VDZ plus A. We do park work all across British Columbia as a majority of our work, so this is something we're really excited about. Billmore and Dogwood Parks is an amazing facility in your community. It's a large park, and we're just really excited to be involved. So I'm going to try to give you a little bit of an overview of the process to date. I do want to give you a little bit of summary outside of the engagement of what we've done so far. So just to quickly go through it, we've taken a topographic survey of the site to show us where all the existing elements are. We've done a geotechnical report, which will tell us what's feasible within the park itself. And then we've also done an arborist report that has basically looked at all the trees on the entire park site. So this next phase is the public engagement. So the perfect purpose of this engagement is to inform and consult. This is a very typical first phase of engagement for us, public engagement. Our goal is to inform the public of what's happening and then consult initially to just ask questions about how the park currently operates and anything around what they'd like to see or just preliminary engagement. It's really around your aspirations for the park. Nothing's been presented to the public at this point. It's really around your aspirations for the park. The engagement methods that we undertook, sorry, I switched by there quickly, was school engagement, pop up in the park, sports user group, and survey. And I'll go through each one of those today. Next time. Engagement and project timeline. So yeah, most of this engagement happened in April with the survey starting in late March. And we kind of did these things one after another and went through that process. We are now in June, obviously, and what you're seeing today is what we call a What We Learned report, which essentially provides a summary of everything we heard and kind of takes away the key points. Next panel, please. The common themes that we heard were around nature, safety, and sports. And I'm going to summarize those really quickly. Just one second. I'll lost my window here. Oh, we're skipping through. There we go. Thank you very much. So the main themes around nature were that the park itself does have a beautiful natural aesthetic. Dogwood Park is obviously filled with trees. There were lots of comments around the nature trails and connecting to the rail trail, as well as just a love of the overall park aesthetic itself. Safety was another one, with lighting being mentioned frequently, as well as just park safety as an overall. This is something we hear a lot in public parks all over British Columbia. And can mean a lot of different things. So as we explore this item moving forward, we'll get more detailed on that. And then sports. Obviously, sports in Bilmore Park is a big one with football and baseball and lawn bowling. So we heard a bunch about that. The three items to the left are typically are kind of the items that we've pulled out of those, which is to upgrade, arrange, and connect the park. And that's kind of going to play into that nature safe. And so what we're trying to figure out is what pieces of the park needed to be upgraded. What is the best arrangement for those pieces so that they can talk to each other? And ultimately, how can we connect them in a safe way so that people, cars, pedestrians, bikes can all move through the park safely? So those are our emerging directions. Next panel. The first engagement we did was at Lake Trail Community School. Personally, this is the most fun that I get to do in my job. It was 6th and 7th graders. There was 35 of them. We gave a little presentation. We do this to most municipalities where we essentially tell them, you're the designer. My job is to give you ideas and inspire you, but at the end of the day, I'd like you to create stuff. So we show them a lot of different parks from British Columbia, what things look like, what they might like to see. We show them parks from their community. And then we give them a little bit more information about how to create things. So do you like to draw? Do you like to write? Would you like to just talk to me? We give them clay and pipe cleaners, sticks, and they kind of make their own park. And once they do that, we ask each group to get together as a team, talk about what they love in the park that they've designed, what they love in other parks, and then provide a little presentation. I will say to the council that the 6th and 7th graders in your community did an amazing job. They were really good. They were like engaged. They gave talks. It was excellent. It was excellent. And some of the things that came out of that, some of the common themes that we heard from them were water park with water slide. I know that might seem to some of you that like if you've been to a water park before, Cultus Lake or wherever you may go, that's not really what a water slide is in the community park, but we do see them now in certain parks with smaller water slides and water activity centers. Trampolines, again, some of those things you might think of in your neighbor's backyard, but they are actually really popular in public parks now, smaller versions of those, so that was really exciting. Bike park, there was one specific group of young boys who just wanted to see a bike park. They had designed something that was probably of the skill level of, I don't know who the Tony Hawk equivalent of BMX is, but probably that. And they were really excited about the bike park. Again, these are really popular in community parks right now. Pump tracks and bump tracks are one of the most requested things we see. And then another group wanted a monster treasure hunt, which I thought was an interesting idea, and we might look into. They had built all these little sculptures that they thought they could put throughout the park, and kids could find them and connect them. And thought that was a really interesting idea. Amenities, renewed playground was number one. I know that most of you who know Billmore probably have seen that playground. That was really high on their list. The second item was a splash park or a spray park, which essentially, for those of you who don't know, it's kind of one level wet down from a wading pool. It's zero depth. It sprays water through the air. You may have one in your community already. And they're very popular. They don't require a lifeguard. They're pretty easy to locate and very popular. Skate park pump track, again, something we hear really frequently. As we get further into development, we can talk about how those different things work together and how those program elements work together. Our firm focuses on action sports, so if that's something we want to talk further about, we can. Washroom upgrades was a big one. And then shaded and covered areas, which is often a request just to have a fun place to hang out. Some of the future programs, inclusive and accessible for all ages and abilities, safe and well lit, multi-use sports courts, environmental sustainability, and quiet passive recreation. So, next panel, please. Oh, next panel. Is that okay? Sorry, did I lose you guys?
We can hear you. Are you, sorry, we might be missing, were you asking us to?
Yeah, sorry, the next panel, next
next slide?
Well, there we
Yeah,
go.
If you
There
just
we
say
go,
next
next
slide, that'll
next
probably
slide.
be, yeah.
Oh, sorry, next slide. The next group we met with was a sports user group. There was 3 of them there, football, baseball, and lawn bowling. All excellent, gave really great feedback, very detailed feedback. The football group, both the football and the baseball group, they had 2 main considerations, which were the drainage on that current field at Billmore is kind of tough over by the forested area. So if there's ways that we could correct that, hence the reason for the geotechnical report. There was talking about lighting of the field and potential synthetic turf upgrade for the football group so they could play in longer seasons. Both the football and the baseball group, we also talked about field sharing and seasons and how we could potentially improve that. And that's kind of that multi-use sport consideration. How do we connect them together so they can both use the site? And finally, the other multi-use consideration was potentially a covered sports box and or clubhouse for joint use. For those of you who don't know what a covered sports box is, they're really popular in the parks and recreation market right now. It's essentially an outdoor covered court that you can use for warm-ups that's shielded from the rain but not fully enclosed. So it's a open to the elements covered facility. And then lawn bowling had kind of their whole list there. They wanted a locked perimeter just to make sure that they could renovate the field and kind of keep things up and going. There's aging backboards, multi-use consideration, to utilize afternoon hours and renting the clubhouse to the user group. So more use of their facility and how can they engage more people was kind of the piece that they were looking for. And then there's some talk about parking spaces. Although generally speaking, and we find it a little more, except for during major events, the parking is adequate.
I just want to mention, as you're talking, every now and again you trail off, and it gets really hard to hear you. So,
okay.
So I'm not sure if it's the mic or not, but we may have to use your outside voice.
Okay, let me try changing mics and see if that helps. Microphone. Let's just try that for 1 second. How's this? Is this better?
Oh, that is definitely better. And sometimes it can be like you move away from the microphone. I'm not too sure because we can't see you right now, but yeah. But there was a few times, and it's only like right at the end, it's sort of a trail off. So, but you definitely sound better. Thanks so much.
Okay, I'll just lean into my microphone. If it gets too loud, let me know. And then the fourth and final thing is the engagement survey. So we conducted an engagement survey, online survey. That information was provided through the city website, was also provided through some QR codes on site during our engagement activities, and had really good responses, 402 responses, with some interesting information that was relayed in those. And some of those comments, I'm not going to read through all of them for you here, but there was a lot of different interesting opinions shared. And the full analysis of that can be provided, and that is provided for that in the What We Learned document. Interestingly enough, 70% visit the park weekly or daily, which is great. That's a high number, especially for engagement. Usually we see less than that. 47% walk to the parks. And then the main item that was mentioned is safety, and that's something we're really going to dig into on this next round of development, because we'll determine what safety means. There you go. Next steps for us after this step is going to be, so we've gave you what we learned, and then we will take this on and create 3 unique concepts with different kind of approaches to the site, each with a different kind of level of involvement for the community, and we'll review that with the city staff and then take that forward for our second round of engagement. That's all.
Fantastic, appreciate that. And then I believe Ms. Chan will be available for questions as well as David online. Does that make sense? All right, and first up, we do have Councillor Jolicoeur.
Really appreciate the fulsome what we heard report. I think the demographical information starting on page 27 was also really helpful to understand who was able to participate to date. I did find it interesting that even in the Moodle, the biggest word is safety, and you've highlighted that that's going to be an area of exploration in the second round of open houses. I did attend the initial open house. No one mentioned safety to me. I guess the lighting, yeah, and you have that in your report, but there wasn't a ton of. There's just the one page of qualitative components. But I'm wondering if you can speak at least initially to what you're hearing are the safety concerns that folks were concerned around.
Joy, would you like me to go first? I can jump in there. The main one I heard when I was on site for those engagements was lighting. That was the main piece that I was hearing was lighting, well lit, in terms of safety. That was the main concern that I heard. And then yeah, to your point, like when I did hear that comment, it was generally about site safety, and then they would immediately mention lighting. So that was the main item that I heard. Yep.
Okay, and then I do have a second question, Mayor. It's around the next steps, if that's okay. So it appears that there's going to be an open house where the 3 options will be provided, I assume, with nice little boards for folks to provide feedback. I guess, and this is just, we have been engaged in a lot of different engagement processes over the last few months. And I guess my curiosity that I have, given the timeline of the engagement, and I don't play baseball or football. I did hear from the lawn bowling folks when I was there, but you know, obviously the public survey had a lot of feedback from folks who just passively use both Billmore and Dogwood Park. And then there was specific engagement with the sports groups. And I guess I'm curious, I imagining those would probably be the organizers or administrators of those sports groups, but I'm thinking about the families and the individuals who themselves are accessing those sports fields and how we might be able to engage them directly in the next phase, recognizing that those sports may or may not be actively using at least Billmore during the time that we have planned. So I guess to shorten my question, is it possible that we engage the families and community that are involved in those 2 sports groups specifically?
I can respond from the consultant's end. It is possible. Yeah, and I think one of the things we did similar to the school user group is an activation on site during an event is, if it's possible within the engagement, is something we have done with multiple user groups, sport user groups. It might be tighter on the football side because we're going to be later in that sport or earlier in that sport. But yeah, it's something we have done in the past. I don't know if Joy or Peter want to add anything to that.
Turn it off and back on.
Thank you, the mayor, the council. So there is a way to reach those groups. We are connected to the baseball, the football, and we have connected them regularly, so we can promote the survey. There's another round of surveys that will come up, and also ensure that when the pop-up event is scheduled, that we let them know that that's happening. So that's the only way that we can encourage them to participate and have those families provide feedback directly.
All right, thanks for that. Councillor Moore.
Great, thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I went down to the open house as well and chatted with quite a few people. And I've actually been going down to that park a little bit. My nephew was in town playing football. Unfortunately, they beat us, but I was also wanting to mention just the synergies between the neighborhood network strategy, because I did chat with a lovely person down there who's part of that group, and I'm sure that they're also doing some good engagement throughout the neighborhood and some neighborhood events that will hopefully generate maybe more engagement than we would have had. So just kudos to that project. And I don't know if staff wanted to say anything about that, but I would say if you'd done this survey now instead of a while ago, the safety issue may have been the mama cougar and the two cubs that were hanging out in Dogwood Park recently, but hopefully they've moved on. Thanks.
Thank you for the mayor and council. So yes, we intentionally also invited the neighborhood network facilitator to the session, and they set up a booth there, a table to also encourage, as people were coming in, participation in the survey, and also what they're putting together through their neighborhood network. And also we also connected with them when the events are coming up related to this project, so they can also share through their contacts what's happening.
Fantastic, thanks for that. And I don't see any further questions, but there's a recommendation. Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor? Any opposed? And motion carries. And I do just want to thank everybody. It's a bit discombobulating with the sound system tonight, so I appreciate everybody's patience. It seems a little disjointed here from time to time. We're going to move on to 5.1, Summer Park Events, Sims Summer Concerts, and Parks Alive. And I'll pass it back over to staff. I'll just sing some Jeopardy music while we're do. All right, I'll pass it over to Connor.
Right, thank you. Thank you for having me. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. I'm pleased to present a brief update on Summer Parks events, including the Sims Concert Series and the Parks Alive pilot. Together, these programs reflect the city's continued commitment to creating vibrant, welcoming, and inclusive public spaces through free community programming. This year brings some exciting changes. Most notably, we are launching the Parks Alive as a new pilot program that expands summer activation beyond a single destination and into neighborhood parks across the city. I want to make a small note that since submitting the report, there was a shift in our timing, and that we're going to be focused on weekday programming, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, versus including a Saturday. So through free fitness, movement, music, games, art, and youth-focused activities, Parks Alive will animate spaces such as Harmston, Glenhawk, Woodcote, Lewis, and Lerwick Skate Park, helping more residents experience the value of their local parks close to home. 2 youth skate park mentors will be recruited and trained through the Link Youth Center and assigned to Lerwick Skate Park. These mentors will provide a supportive presence at the park, offering first aid assistance, skill development opportunities, and safety promotion activities to help maintain a clean and welcoming environment at the outdoor skate park. There are also enhancements to the Sims Summer Concert Series. Because of the construction at Sims Millennial Park, this year's concerts will begin at Lewis Park, ensuring that the series continues until it can return to Sims after the completion of the 6th Street Bridge. As soon as the site can safely accommodate the event, based on a review of post-construction site conditions, we will coordinate the shift back to Sims. We are introducing new features that will enhance visitor experience this season. For most concert dates, there will be food vendors on site, creating a more dynamic event atmosphere while also supporting local businesses. In addition, a new site host role has been added to welcome attendees, support event flow, provide MC services, and help staff gather feedback and attendance data. This is an important step forward in both audience experience and program evaluation, giving us stronger information to guide future improvements. Overall, this is a year of growth, adaptation, and renewed energy for summer programming. Both of these initiatives are free, family-friendly, and designed to foster belonging, well-being, and community pride. They support local artists, encourage residents to gather outdoors, and help activate public spaces in ways that are accessible and welcoming to a broad range of residents. We are excited to bring these experiences to the community and look forward to adapting and improving them in response to what we learned this season. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thanks for that, and I'll pass it over to Councillor Jolicoeur.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. This was a really fun report to read, one of the funnest I think we've seen. So thank you for this. And I was actually surprised. I had forgotten that we had talked about this Parks Alive pilot, and I'm really looking forward to seeing some of the outcomes, and also appreciate that we're going to be doing some debriefing with the folks who are either facilitating or performing at those events and activities, while also engaging the community, providing feedback to learn. I think it similar to the previous report and Councillor Morin's comments around our work around community development. I think this aligns really closely with that work in creating a sense of belonging, especially around certain neighborhoods. My question, based on your correction to the report, the Saturday, which was actually the longest period of time, is a 4-hour period, 3-hour period. I guess they're all 3 hours, but at Harmston Park. So we're not losing a Harmston Park that's just being added. Are we also losing that as a location for Parks Alive?
Thank you. Through the Mayor to Councillor Jolicoeur. Sorry, we're tag teaming this. Kathy Collins is leading our Parks Alive programming, so Connor has been very gracious to introduce both for us. We're not losing Harmston Park. We're just changing to focus on weekdays for a couple of reasons. One is we actually find the weekends folks are out doing other things in nature, camping. Also, less folks are working, so more kids have parents and families around on weekends. And part of this program is to offer some safe programming and activity for kids who don't otherwise have programs and activities during that time. So that weekday addresses a lot of families who have working parents at that time. And also staffing availability on weekends, to be honest, is quite challenging. So we're focused on 3 days a week, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. We haven't released the schedule completely yet. It'll be published very shortly, but we'll have confirmed times. We'll be at the same park on the same day for the same hours every week for the length of the program, so that community will know and can expect when we'll be there. Staff will also be on the days that the park is activated. The intention is that they're going over in the morning and dropping off some shared equipment, different sort of family style, life-size games that will be out all day, and then the staff will arrive on site for that programmed section. We are planning, I think have confirmed for Woodcote on Thursday nights that it's music in the park, so there'll be a musical performance and act on all Thursday nights at Woodcote, which we're really excited about. So.
Excellent. Thanks so much for that. And Councillor Morin.
Great. Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I'm super excited about this. I actually ran into Connor outside and said, I said, this is just such a great report, and I'm thrilled about the Parks Alive edition. And just hearing about that we're going to have some music in some of those neighborhood parks is great. I totally understand the piece around having to move the concert series to Lewis, but I'm really, really hoping that we can shift it back to Sims as quickly as possible, and maybe now that the construction is ahead of schedule for the bridge, hopefully we can do that. It's actually, for anyone who hasn't gone there, which I'm sure most of the people here have, those concerts are just phenomenal. Like when you talk about 500 to 2,500, yeah, absolutely. I've been when it's just been, that whole hill is just packed and people are having such a great time, and you know, Lewis is wonderful. It's wonderful we have it right there, but Sims just is very, very special. So hopefully we can get back to Sims as quickly as possible. I also looked at the lineup of entertainment. It's always such a great variety for all tastes. So I guess I guess the only question really is around yeah, I can't hold you to that when we might expect that. But I guess the question would be, because the construction is ahead of schedule, is that going to hopefully help us out getting those concerts over to Sims sooner rather than later? And not sure who can answer that, but nobody really knows. Still up in the air.
Through the mayor to Councillor Moore, and it's still unknown. I wish I could give you a clear answer, but while the bridge will be done, the post-construction activities, cleanup, and the preparation of the park to return it to its current state all takes a little bit longer, and we don't have a time estimate, and we want to make sure the site can host that number of people, that kind of traffic, that volume, before we relocate or return, I should say, back to Sims.
I also love the addition of the food trucks. I usually stop and get some food before I go down to the concert or bring a picnic, which is great. And I have gone to a couple of the downtown businesses to get food beforehand, but I think having the food trucks down there will be awesome. Thanks.
Excellent, thanks. Councillor Hilling, did I see your hand up or are you good?
I was just going to give a ringing endorsement to our Recreation and Parks Department for these great programs. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you so much for that. Much appreciated. I think all the council is pretty excited where things are at. So it's fantastic. You have a recommendation? Oh,
So moved.
okay. Well, we shall receive unanimously. Thanks, everybody. And we'll move on to next item. Oh, let's just notice the motions. I believe Councillor Jolicoeur.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Maybe I'll read it out first. But in our distributed package, it speaks to the timing of this. But this is a notice of motion, at least right now, for the Union of British Columbia Municipalities, provincial support for community food banks and food distribution. Whereas food banks and community food distribution organizations across British Columbia are experiencing record demand due to rising housing costs, food prices, and affordability pressures. And whereas these organizations provide essential support to residents, families, seniors, workers, students, and vulnerable populations while operating largely through donations, volunteers, and unstable funding sources. Therefore, be it resolved that UBCM urge the province of BC to establish stable multi-year core operating funding for community food banks and regional food distribution organizations. And be it further resolved that such funding supports staffing, transportation, refrigeration, warehousing, food recovery programs, culturally appropriate food access, rural and remote distribution, and partnerships with local government, Indigenous governments, health authorities, schools, and community organizations. And the deadline for the UBCM mayor is the June 15th. So I had distributed this last week to council to seek consent to suspend the rules so that we can consider this as a council resolution so that it can make the UBCM deadline. Yeah.
And that might, Councillor Hilling, is that what you wanted to speak to?
I'll move we suspend the rules to deal with this motion tonight, Mr. Mayor.
I think that was seconded by Councillor Frisch, and so with that, it is now on the floor. Back to.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. So this item came as the City of Courtenay's rep to the Comox Valley Food Policy Council. We've had the pleasure of having representation from the Comox Valley Food Bank at the last few meetings, and they really have articulated quite clearly the pressure that they are under. I have some stats here from Justin, who's the Associate Executive Director. Just for context locally, we've seen our food bank here locally go up in usage 10% just this last year and 138% over the last 3 years. They had just under 50,000 visits last year. And we collectively at the Comox Valley Food Bank support 5,580 households. Of that amount, 76% are Courtenay residents. And so, and one of the things that I learned, and I should mention that the trends are indicating that the average visitation has increased from twice monthly to 3 times monthly from those residents who are accessing food bank services. And in learning about our food bank, and in speaking with UBCM as well, there hasn't actually been any advocacy on operating funding for food banks at UBCM. It's quite clear that this is an increasing need in the community to have core funding. Like a lot of nonprofits, they struggle and kind of cobble together donations and other sources of funding. So we pulled this together. I did pass it by the Food Policy Council and our good folks at the Comox Valley Food Bank for their commentary, and they were supportive of this motion. And I hope that I have the support from council so that this can go to UBCM so we can advocate to the province for some ongoing consistent funding for food banks. Thanks.
Oops. Sorry. We didn't vote on the actual suspension, so all those in favor? Sorry, we got a little ahead of ourselves. Any opposed? So that passes. And then if you want, we can have the motion itself.
So moved.
Okay. All right. And so we're good. Sorry, I think we're a little excited to get things going there. And then I'll pass it over to Councillor Moore.
Great, thanks, Mayor. Yeah, I'm fully in support of this motion. I think we've seen, I think we really started to see a difference with COVID and how people were struggling more. And I know even my own, I go to get my own groceries. I'm really happy that I have a food garden now because when I finally started actually having to buy produce, that's when I really noticed how much more I was spending. So I think whatever support we can offer to food banks is important because I think the stress on our food security is only going to get more so. Thanks.
Thanks very much for that. So the motion is on the floor. I don't see any further. Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I just had a quick question. I don't know if Councillor Jolicoeur knows the answer, but you mentioned that the food bank in town here cobbles together their funding. Do you know what the main sources are typically?
Yeah, I learned there is Food Bank Canada is their primary funder, and that's their primary reporting. So all the statistics I laid out are the statistics that they report back up to Food Banks Canada, that then reports up to the Government of Canada, that feeds into the poverty report, the National Poverty Report. So that's their primary funder, and it doesn't meet the need. So they require local donations. I think the mayor and myself were at the most recent fundraiser. And then working with local restaurants and grocery stores for donations, and then donations, of course, from the public more broadly. But their operating funding primarily comes from fundraising and Food Banks Canada.
Sorry, I don't know. Yeah, thanks. And Food Bank Canada, that's federally funded? Okay, thanks.
Yeah, thanks. And it is way faster if I don't turn my mic on and off, so that's why I'm sort of just pointing. If that's all right. Excellent. So I think we had a good discussion around this. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? And motion carries. Thanks, Councillor Jolicoeur, for bringing this forward. And we do have a councillor resolution for operational and service level review. Over to Councillor Jolicoeur. Oh.
Thanks, Mayor. Operational and service level review. Whereas the City of Courtenay has experienced sustained growth in operating costs, staffing, service demands, capital infrastructure requirements over multiple financial planning cycles. And whereas BC local government practice recognizes service level operational core service and service delivery reviews as effective public sector tools. And whereas council should periodically confirm whether municipal services are being delivered at a level that is necessary, affordable, and aligned with resident business expectations, or whether a different service standard or delivery approach could provide comparable public value at lower costs. And whereas preparing a review framework now would allow the next council to make informed decisions early in its term rather than beginning the next financial planning cycle without a clear evidence base. Therefore, be it resolved that Courtenay Council directs staff to prepare a term of reference and work plan for an operational and service level review to support the next financial planning cycle following the October 2026 election, and that the terms of reference include consideration of service levels, staffing and organizational alignment, business process improvements, cost recovery, alternative service delivery models, technology and artificial intelligence opportunities, engagement options, and implementation considerations for council review. There's also a briefing note and a template attached to our agenda for council's review. Yeah, then looking for a second before I can speak to it, I guess. Yeah. That's okay.
We'll continue on to 8.1, unfinished business for Clinton LaFrance, Courtenay skateboard revitalization for May 27th delegation that came up. And there is a proposed motion that's on the screen that I think all council has seen. I'm not sure if there's any questions, and I'll pass it over to.
Yeah, I don't see any lights. I'll move the recommendation that council direct staff to consider new and upgraded skate parks through future strategic park planning initiatives, including but not limited to the Billmore and Dogwood Park strategic plan, the Lewis Park strategic plan, and the skate park strategy, and that council direct staff to proceed with condition assessments, maintenance plans, and budget cost estimates to return or maintain the Lewis Park, Valley View Park, and Link skateboard parks to their intended service levels, and that council directs staff to continue to explore potential partners in these processes. And if I have a seconder, I'll just speak quickly to it. Yeah, I just think that some of this is in the scope of work that staff is already doing, and whether Clinton has all his wishes met is to be determined, but at least it does kind of get it into the plan to take a look at. And obviously, I think condition assessments are hugely important for all of our assets, especially recreational assets where we have young folks utilizing those. So thank you.
Thanks for that. We'll see if I can, you guys don't have to turn your mics off. We're going to give it a test here. Over to Councillor Gilles.
I think this is working. Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I guess my question is to staff in the first paragraph to consider new. And I'm not sure in all of the recreational strategic planning and facilities assessments and what we heard in the compelling case of Mr. Lofkrantz is that we might not necessarily need new. And I was actually in his assessment, I think there was a stat around it would cost potentially $1 million for a net new asset, new facility rather than upgrading. And so just the scope of work here, I'm not sure from staff's assessment why we would be looking at net new. Like we hear regularly from different sports groups around the need for new assets. And I'm not sure if we've heard from the skateboarding community that we need an additional new asset beyond the assets that we have. I think we've heard clearly that we require some upgrading of our existing assets. So I'm wondering if staff can speak to that, the work that you're wanting to do around new skate parks.
Thank you, through Mayor to council. So when we indicate consider new, that is not just looking at Lewis Park. It is looking at Courtenay as a whole. And I like to direct to what we heard through the Billmore Park, where the students had indicated the need or the want of skate park or a skate pump track. And so I think what we're saying is that it's not just Lewis Park that we have to look. We have to look at Courtenay. We have to look at where they're located. So most of them are in central Courtenay or in East Courtenay, but there's nothing really in West Courtenay. And through these planning process, that's how we're going to hear from the community, and that's how we're going to be determined, well, really, is there really a new facility that's needed? And also there is a future skate park strategy that we also are planning to engage into. So that would be a more detailed engagement with the youth in the community and determining, you know, what are their needs and whether, yeah, what exactly is needed in infrastructure.
Excellent. Thanks very much. And I'll pass it over to Councillor Frisch.
Thanks, Mayor. Oh, wow, that works. It's not. Yeah, I was wondering about the timelines on that. Of course, we just heard about Dogwood Park. You said the skate park. Is that something new that we haven't heard about before? Or am I just forgetting that we have such a strategy? It sounded like it was new. Yeah, it's new, right? No, it's not.
Thank you, the Mayor through Council. So that is in our long-term plan, our 5-year plan, financial plan to do that, and it is in, I believe, 2028. That is, sorry, excuse me, 2029, and that is planned for, and so one of the things that we could do is move that project up so it's done sooner, hearing that there is a need for to reconsider, you know, what the skateboard needs are. So, but that currently in the budget financial plan, it's slated for 2029.
I guess my question was just on timing. How do you, like, if we pass this, what is realistically, when might some sort of conversation come back to council about a skate park? Is it something we'd hear about in this term, or are we thinking somewhere in the next, year or two?
Thank you, the Mayor of the Council. So I would say Bilmore Park, where we heard specific feedback on skate park infrastructure. That could be a pump track. I think that needs to be developed more through the concept plans and then the feedback through community. So that's where I see in terms of 2020, 2027, if through that process that is confirmed that feature is something that is desired by the community, then that would be the most recent project that we would look at. And then Lewis Park is coming up in 2028 in terms of the strategic plan review and long-term visioning for that park. So I think through that process, and also in communication with our skateboarding communities through our Lewis Link. They have a youth program there that they're already connected to a lot of the skateboard community. So we're going to hear feedback through those mechanisms to see exactly where it's needed. So we have lots of different, I think, avenues for engagement that are currently in place that we're going to be able to come back to council with those answers.
Excellent. Thanks very much. Appreciate that. Any further questions or comments? Seeing none. With motions on the floor, all those in favor? Any opposed? And motion carries. Just before we get into bylaws, our meals have arrived. So I think if we take a break and then we can come back to bylaws and then finish up our meeting. So we'll come back at 5. Oh, I'm thinking it's going to be 5:55, 6 o'clock. Let's say 6. Yeah. I would say 6 o'clock. That makes it simple. And that gives us about 20 minutes, depending on what clock you're using. All right. Thanks, everybody. All right, everybody, we're just going to continue on with our regular meeting. We're on 9.1.1 zoning amendment bylaw 3230 for 3095 Lake Trail Road for first and second readings. And I'll pass it over to Mr. Garvin.
Thank you. Through the Mayor to Council, over the next couple of meetings, we have a series of rezonings, actually stretching back in the last sort of 4 meetings in total, 2 previous and 2 incoming. We have a series of OCP compliant applications that, in accordance with our very clear direction from the province and our community plan, we're going to be bringing forward a number of residential housing projects. For this application under 911, Andrew Stewart Jones, our planner 2 from Development Services, is going to introduce the report.
Do you have to click here? Might be on the podium.
Great. Through the mayor, the council. So before I go into the report, I do want to mention that we have the applicant, Evan Pedersen, here. He will be representing, who's representing the applicant. Evan is attending online and will be available to answer questions regarding the application. Okay, so the application before you is to rezone the property at 3095 Lake Trail Road from residential 1A zone to the medium density multi-residential zone. The zone, this rezoning is to permit a proposed development of 30 residential townhouse units. So the subject property is in the Arden Corridor area of West Courtenay and is approximately 1 hectare in size. The property is located along Lake Trail Road, directly north of Arden Elementary and at the edge of the boundary of the city of Courtenay. Surrounding properties consist mostly of mid-sized rural residential lots. Comox Valley Regional District lands are located along the subject property's eastern property line, northern property line, and to the south. So the site is relatively flat with a low point located on the north of the property. Arden Creek runs the length of the subject property along the north into the wetland and along the property's east boundary. Along this property edge, Arden Creek contains mature trees that will be retained and maintained through a conservation covenant. So in terms of the official community plan, the subject property is designated as urban residential, which supports apartment developments up to 4 stories in height. The proposed use is consistent with the official community plan and does not require an official community plan amendment. In terms of the site design, the proposed concept plan is for 30 residential townhouse units proposed as a building strata. The unit mix has not yet been confirmed, but will likely consist of 2 to 3 bedroom units. The applicant has also proposed shared amenity areas for residents that may be used for communal activities. Parking is indicated as meeting the bylaw requirements. So as previously mentioned, the site will be rezoned from residential 1A zone to medium density multi-residential zone. A zoning comparison table on pages 5 and 6 of this report compare the current zone with the proposed zone and include notable changes such as allowing townhouses, decreasing the minimum lot size, increasing density, increasing the lot coverage, and increasing the height. The RM1 zone also has increased requirements for vehicle parking, bicycle parking, and usable open space. So an environmental development permit will be required prior to any land altering activities. The applicant completed an environmental impact assessment, which outlines the developable area and indicates that a minimum 54% of the total development will be reserved for permanent conservation based on the 30-meter setback from the wetland at the rear / north end of the property and a 10-meter setback from Arden Creek. These setbacks were previously approved by the Riparian Areas Protection Regulation. The environmental impact assessment proposes, so the 54% that the environmental impact assessment proposes will be protected by a conservation covenant and will include management expectations of the conservation lands, and these will be a condition of rezoning. So an amenity package has been negotiated with the applicant with contributions towards the Affordable Housing Fund. Staff have worked with the applicant to structure an affordable housing amenity package that reflects the unknown variable of whether amenity cost charges will apply to this application. The package includes a scenario for both if the amenity cost charge rates do not apply and if they do apply. So in the case where amenity cost charges do not apply, the applicant will offer two-bedroom dwelling units at below market rates for 12 years. If the amenity cost charges do apply, the applicant is offering one-bedroom dwelling unit at below market for 10 years. A housing agreement bylaw has been finalized. Once a housing agreement bylaw has been finalized, it will be brought to council for first, second, and third readings, and the zoning bylaw application will be brought to council for third reading at the same time. So I'll briefly touch on, we had a community information meeting for this application as per our development procedures. This was held on January 26, 2026. 15 members of the public were in attendance and 14 written responses were submitted as written comments and emails following the meeting. In general, most attendees did not support the development, and some of the concerns that were highlighted included concerns about neighborhood impact, so increases in density, traffic, and light pollution. The second was concerns about environmentally sensitive areas, including development in close proximity to riparian areas. The third was concerned about the affordability as well as tenure and unit mix. And the third was concerns about process and public engagement. So for example, not having a public hearing as a part of the process. So the full community information meeting summary report can be found in attachment 4 of this report. So we also completed a notification that a public hearing is not being held. Following this, 15 comments were received from the public prior to today's 1 p.m. deadline. These were included in the attachments of this report. I'd like to mention that one of the comments was missed in the final package, and this comment was provided to council by email. So we have 2 proposed conditions for the rezoning. The first proposed condition is a Section 219 covenant on title for the protection and conservation area, including the lands depicted as buffer and trail in attachment 2. And the second condition is a housing agreement bylaw registered as a 219 covenant on title. Staff would also like to briefly touch on the Arden local area plan, as this was brought up by quite a few of the comments from members of the public. So staff would like to add that we recognize that we did not provide a bulleted summary of policies within the Arden local area plan that were met by this development. Staff want to clarify that we did evaluate the proposed development against the policy in the Arden local area plan and can confirm that these policies are met. Staff are happy to answer any questions that council may have regarding the Arden local area plan policy. Thank you for your time, and staff will be available to answer any questions regarding the development.
Excellent. Thanks for that. And I'll pass it over to Councillor Frisch.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor, and thanks for the report. Yeah, I'm interested in hearing a bit more about how this fits in with the Arden local area plan. I guess a question I might ask is, you said this is in line with the OCP, and the OCP allows apartment buildings, I think it was, up to so many stories. At what point would staff say something like, well, this is pretty far from transportation, it's kind of out in the middle of, not nowhere, but it's definitely in the middle of Area C, and it doesn't fit? At what point would we say that? Like, if they came in and wanted to build apartment buildings there, would we be like, well, that's how it's outlined in the OCP, so let's do it? What's your thought on that?
Can you hear me? Through the mayor to council. So there's a number of requirements that an applicant would have to meet. So in terms of this site, there's quite a few environmentally sensitive areas, so you wouldn't be able to build in those areas. You'd also have to meet parking requirements, and so in terms of between meeting the environmentally sensitive areas, meeting the parking requirements, and meeting and all these pieces to feed into, like, let's say we're talking about a 4-story apartment building, it would become really probably quite challenging for a developer. That being said, they're still able to put forward an application. I think that, yeah, we have, like I said, we haven't had an application like that on this parcel. So without knowing the exact details, we wouldn't be able to say whether we would support it or not. But in general, it would have to meet some very thorough guidelines. And I think that this application, you know, it's had to, for example, provide a large environmentally sensitive area, conserved area, and then also meet open space requirements, and then also meet our parking requirements and our setback requirements. So it would be really challenging for someone to develop a larger apartment building on the site.
Yeah, thanks for the response. I'll just quickly point out that this piece of property, I'm actually not sure why it was brought into the city. I'm sure there was some reasoning around the school. And it probably goes way back. Someone can comment on it if they know, but it's a pretty unique piece of the city. And I suppose staff realize that already. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Frisch. And yeah, and just a huge thanks to staff that rebooted the sound system. So I think we're good, but time will tell. Yeah, I have him written down here, and then the ones in here. So Councillor Hillian, you're up, and then there's a few lights on in here. So
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I do have quite a few questions, so I'll ask a couple and then get back in line. First of all, I just wanted to clarify, there's a note in the report that the development could be up to 4 stories, but I believe it's also stated that the plan is to build townhouses that are 3. Could I just get some clarification on that?
oh, I'll just sorry, I've turned there you go.
Yeah, through the mayor to council. So the 4 stories is what's allowed in the official community plan. But to be clear, the rezoning that's been applied for is for up to 3 stories. So 11 meters, I believe, is the maximum height.
Okay.
And you can probably leave your mic on. Okay.
Thanks. And my second question for now is with regards to the area identified by the number 6 in the conceptual site plan. It looks like that's the area where there would be the tree buffer between the existing homes on Webb Road and the new development. I note that some of the people at the public information meeting expressed concern about trees coming down, and that new trees planted would take a significant time to grow. Did have an opportunity to meet some of the people who live in that area last week, and this was certainly one of their concerns. So I just wanted to get some clarification in the reports. The impression I got was that very few of those trees would actually be removed, and that there would be a significant tree buffer that would remain there. Could we get some confirmation on that, please?
Through the mayor to council. So the environmental buffer will be 10 meters. So that will be a buffer that will not be developed by Arden Creek. In terms of the trees, so there was a arborist report from a few years ago, and they found 91 trees on the property, and of those 91, 82 are within an environmentally sensitive area. So there was only 9 trees that were within the development area, and some of those trees would also be included in that buffered area between the conservation area and the development. So we don't have, in terms of the report from the arborist, we don't have the exact map with all the different trees, but we also acknowledge this report was done. I think it's about 4 years old at this point. So if they were going to move ahead and apply for environmental development permit, we would require an updated arborist report.
Thanks. And I did see Mr. Peterson nodding in relation to the trees, most of the trees in the buffer remaining. So good to hear that. Thanks for now.
And Ms. Guthard, you had a addendum? Oh, turn somebody else on. Who was it?
I believe I'm on now. Thank you,
Yeah.
through the mayor. I just wanted to add to my colleague's comment there, just about also in that environmentally sensitive area that would be dedicated covenant strata owned. We are implementing a policy that was adopted in the official community plan recently, which is to include management expectations within those covenant areas so that it's clear to the strata development what can and cannot occur in those ESAs, environmental sensitive areas. We have a history of having environmental covenants that treat those areas as if they will never change, and yet as living systems, we know they will. So part of that is making sure that there's no hazards to begin with when the dedication, the protection, conservation protection occurs, but then also the ongoing understanding of maintaining a restoration in there and making sure invasive species, for instance, are not overtaking the area. So I just wanted to add that extra piece about the management of the buffer.
Fantastic. Much appreciated. And so the sound system is pretty good now, but if people are turning their mics on and off like we were before, it does, as I'm clicking OK, I'll get the wrong person. So regardless of what the mics might be telling us right now, I believe Councillor Jolicoeur is next, then Councillor Moore, and then Councillor McCollum. So, but it does mean that I have to now figure out what number you are. And over to you, Councillor Jolicoeur.
Thanks, Mayor. And thanks to staff for bringing the report forward, and to the citizens who engaged in the CIM and then subsequently writing to us. I have reviewed, including the most recent edition that was sent via email, and it appears like a lot of the concerns are actually addressed in the staff report, but there are others, and similar to Councillor Helene, I do have a fair bit of questions, so I'm happy to just ask one or two and then get back in line. But my first question is around vehicle parking, and I'm glad that the proponent is here because from the visuals of the development, it appears that there's going to be garages and then also driveways. And it looks like the RM1 zone, we have 1.2 stalls per unit for a total of 36 stalls. And as articulated from residents and from Councillor Frisch as well, it is an awkward part of the community in that we have the new multi-use path that doesn't quite go up to this development, but not too far away. And there's just a shoulder, and I know it's across the street from the school, not too far from the school, I should say. But there's still some safety concerns. So I guess my question around vehicle parking, because there's the 4 visitor parkings and the 36 stalls, and the staff report articulates that the final number won't be yet known, I think, until the development permit stage. And given that that's a staff delegated process, I'm wondering if the proponent can speak to at least where you're at now in terms of how many vehicles each unit could foreseeably see parking. And the reason I ask, and obviously everyone involved with this knows that there is no parking on the shoulder there. There's no room for parking. And we are doing a better job, I think, of traffic control there with the new reduction of speed. But I am concerned that this may have overflow impacts onto Webb Road specifically. If there is, say, each unit has a 2-vehicle home, for example. So I'm wondering if the staff or the proponent can speak to where we're thinking this is going with the vehicle parking.
Yeah, Evan, you can just unmute yourself and respond. Thanks so much.
Great, thanks. Yeah, so right now this is obviously just it's a conceptual site plan. Those sorts of details are still to be determined at the development permit stage. Right now, the way that we've drawn this and done the transportation impact analysis and so on was at an upper end of units, which was 30 as in the report. I think it's probably unlikely it'll be that many units. It's likely to be less. But if it is that many, there'll be a number of smaller units, which would have typically lower rates of automobiles per unit. So we're expecting, given cost of housing and transportation and so on, that somewhere in the neighborhood of 1 to 1.5 per unit. But again, they will be required to meet the off-street parking bylaw, and we'll be working with I'll be working with the owners to make sure that parking is handled entirely on site.
Thanks. And my second question, Mayor, and it's articulated in the feedback from residents in the neighborhood, and staff did speak to it in their opening remarks, but I'm wondering if we could just have some additional clarification as it relates to the environmental sensitive area, specifically the buffer zone from Arden Creek there and the 10-meter. I think there was some communication in the correspondence around a 30-meter buffer. And I know that there was some environmental work done and assessments done. And so I'm wondering if staff can just clarify for the public why it's 10 meters. Thanks.
Ms. Gilther.
All right, thank you for the question through the mayor. Indeed, all the setbacks comply with the riparian area regulations, provincial, and also the Species at Risk Act for the protected lamp at the federal level. The federal system has predetermined setbacks, and then the wrapper system requires that the biologists go to the site and actually do measurements, etc. So these setbacks are meeting those more senior government requirements. Now, where the Arden Local Area Plan comes in and OCP in general encouraging wider setbacks is, I'll just draw your attention to the part of the buffer area that's just shown as item 5. I think that's tracking to that. This amenity, is that correct? Yeah. So there is a lighter color green right next to where the 10-meter buffer is that's shown by number 6. That lighter color green, but not the lightest green, that's right next to the buildings. And I'm referring to page 4. So sorry if I'm not clear on that. But there's additional setback there. This is a very similar approach taken on another project on 11th Street, where there's a low impact development zone that is primary landscaping. There are some human uses like trail use that can occur in there, but it is kind of like a buffer for the buffer. And so that is exceeding any type of senior government environmental regulations. And those widths are an additional 6.25 to 17.5 added to the 10 along that part of the Arden Creek there. So just to kind of, I realize, maybe some of that explanation was needed to help explain how that buffer piece works, and we do have precedent in other developments.
Excellent. Thanks for that articulation. And I'll go on to Councillor Morin. There we go.
Great, thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I have several questions, so I'll just have to do a couple, I guess. One of my questions is, if this is already under SHMU, so there could be 4 dwellings on this property without any changes. And I guess I'm curious, the sort of area that's been put aside on the site plan area 1, all of the ecosystem piece, is it correct that all of that has to be protected? Like if SHMU was, if they just did 4 dwellings, could they infringe on any of that area? Because what I read was they can occupy up to 70% of the piece, but how much of the piece is actually that they're actually able to build on in relation to the eco-sensitive area?
Yeah, through the mayor to council. So the new zone would permit up to 70% lot coverage, but one of the things we noted in the report is that there will be a condition of rezoning, and one of those conditions is a section 219 covenant on title for the protection of the conservation area, including the lands depicted as buffer and trail in the concept plan. So we would want to have that secured at the rezoning stage. Following the rezoning, they also have to meet the environmental development permit requirements, and so that would be an internal process, but we would potentially use the same environmental impact assessment and then use that as a way to regulate conservation areas. And I want to say that there's not just there's a conservation piece, there's also a piece of adding there's also a piece of adding some additional riparian species to and increasing the quality of that riparian area. So yeah, those are kind of the ways that we can look after that and protect it.
Yeah, sorry, I thank you for that. I guess my question is, what's shown here, is that more than what they have to do? So I guess I'm trying to determine that if they didn't do the rezoning and they just did SHMU, they could actually potentially infringe on more of this area than they are in this land.
Through the chair, this is a, they're using the land that they can because the rest is environmentally sensitive. Sometimes you might have a parcel of land and you might lose 80% of it because it's environmentally. So they're protecting the environmental land, and they're putting these potentially 30 units on there. We don't know if that's the final number.
Right.
And so that the issue is, if there wasn't all of this environmental significance on the site, they could probably get a whole lot more units. But because you lose that comes out automatically of your lot that you can't develop. So this is actually, considering the size, the total net gross size of the lot, it's lower density than it could be. And even if it was SHMU, they would still have to meet those requirements for the environmental, and you wouldn't be able to build on it anyway.
Okay, yeah, I just wondered with the comparison with the SHMU and what they're asking for. Okay, I'll ask one more and then I'll.
Ms. Gothard has a.
Sorry.
Yeah, I can just add a little more. Looks like it takes a team here to work on a file.
Yeah, this council takes a team, that's right.
Just to clarify, the parcel right now is not the SHMU zone. It is the R1A.
right,
It does allow 4 units though per lot. You
Okay,
are
so
correct
that's
about
what I thought.
that. The thing is the lot size is 1 hectare currently, so they could not subdivide.
Okay.
If it was SHMU, they could subdivide quite a bit.
Yeah.
But this proposal is for something called RM1, which is not SHMU.
Right, my confusion when I
Yep.
saw 4 units, I was just thinking that.
That's no
Okay.
problem, but I will actually offer just a little more information just to clarify with the environmentally sensitive areas. So to be clear, again, referencing back to page 4 in the images there, and there's a darker green with the numbers 1 and 6. Doesn't matter what kind of development came forward, that would have to be protected. The additional greens there, the little bit lighter green and then the very light green, that is additional setback that would become enshrined. Now, again, it is a low impact development zone. It's not exactly only nature in there, but it's quite nature dominant. That this proposal provides. So through the rezoning and the condition of the covenant, the environmental covenant through this rezoning application, that then gets locked in permanently as protection. So if this proposal came forward under another rezoning, let's say, 2 years from now, that covenant wouldn't be there. And so we'd go through this process again to understand the right balance of environmental protection.
Okay. I can get back in the queue because there's people waiting. Thanks.
All
And
right.
then I'll come back.
Thanks. Yeah. Well, it seems that council has decided to do 2 questions each at some point. So we all have control. So Councilor McCollum.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Yeah, I think a number of my questions actually have been covered just in some of the responses that staff have provided around this. And it seems as though we're still on the questions part, but I guess I have some just general comments to share. I think that there is a real community benefit in having this sensitive area go through a development process, and that it allows for some restoration to take place and some more thought around how that creek system can be supported and protected. I mean, the environmental report in the proposal is very thorough, and it's clear that there's opportunities for more plantings and dealing with some invasive species. So although that is a requirement in doing a development like this, I think it's important to highlight that there is a community benefit and that it's supporting our ecosystem. And also, it was my understanding from reading the report that there is a requirement to provide an extension on the frontage for that multi-use path, and could staff confirm that I had that right? Or what the frontage improvements are that are required as part of the development?
But yes, through mayor to council, so the frontage improvements would be regulated by our subdivision servicing bylaw and our engineering department. In terms of frontage, there's no requirement for additional frontage dedication at the front of this property because the Lake Trail Road is already at the 20-meter dedication. Yeah, I don't know if anyone else want to speak to.
I guess my question is, and I could be wrong about this, but I believe it's like kind of an open ditch there. And just from the drawings, I mean, it's hard for me to imagine that we would leave something like an open ditch there between the back of that townhome development and the roadway. So just what that, you know, interface would look like if the zoning goes ahead.
Yeah, thank you for the clarification and a chance for us to clarify too. Just just on page 3, just confirming where the funded and planned phase 1 and 2 Lake Trail multi-use path will extend to. It will extend to Webb Road. That's its farthest western extent. So apologies if that wasn't clear. What was being communicated and was intended to be communicated in the report is that the multi-use path is quite close to this development, but it does not front on it. The road standard for this particular area has not changed. So it is still with the ditches, et cetera, at this point. Now, just kind of depending on the nature, the timing of this particular development, it is conceivable, I suppose, if this project took a while to actually be constructed, that different frontage may be required if the strategic transportation plan starts generating some different road cross sections, et cetera. But it is our understanding that there is not a frontage improvement needed that would, for instance, curb and gutter or something like that. So the road will look like it does now.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it does not make sense to keep an open ditch there. It's an opportunity to address that, because I mean, it's not really a standard that makes sense in a municipality where we're approving a development of 30 units and then leaving an open ditch in front. I mean, inevitably, at some point, that's gonna need to be improved in some way. And we've just seen recently how incredibly difficult and expensive it can be to address these things after the fact. So, I mean, if there is a development happening, that's the opportunity to address those things. So, I guess I'd be curious to know if we can require that at this stage, or how much certainty there is around getting that improvement in place as part of this.
And Mr. Corbett has a comment as well.
Thank you through the mayor to council. Council may recall that residents in this area, that the road itself is actually in the city, but many of the residents are not. And they came to this council demanding to have a protected area for pedestrian connection back to Lake Trail. And there was significant effort there. The strategic transportation plan will look at the road standard there. This is an urban development inside an emerging urban edge. Part of the reason why the city has had some challenges meeting our growth requirements is that each time we stretch our boundary, which is infrequent, but we had maintained incredibly large parcel sizes. And so under a smart growth scenario, we need to be able to encourage this kind of urban development, but we actually have to require from developers to front end the urban component of that. And so through the subdivision approval process, through the development permitting process, and then the application of our road standards, what the frontage improvements related to this, if the community plan doesn't prescribe the zoning conditions to require the extension of a multi-use pathway or whatever, we will be working through that through the approving officer function as well as the development permitting. And we have emerging through the strategic transportation plan what that treatment would be. So at this point, we have a gap. And so we will be working towards that. And I just would acknowledge that this is quite conceptually challenging because we have very large rural parcel sizes there, although it's inside the municipal boundary. And our prescription for municipal fully serviced properties is to have a variety of uses at significant density, balancing transportation requirements and environmental issues. So in my review of this report, that work closely with staff, is this is the type of balance that is a result. And it provides an opportunity for a variety of uses inside neighborhoods and is quite emblematic of what the OCP strives for. We're right across the street from a major school site. So, you know, conceptually it's challenging in neighborhoods, these sort of changes, but upon receipt of housing targets and expectations for the province, this is the type of infill. I would suggest that if it was a large lot rural estate development, that wouldn't be positive to Councillor Frisch's question about what would the planners look like. This is you know, we use the community plan and council's endorsement of that community plan to help inform the development approval process. And there's going to be some changes inside neighborhoods. It's important to note that those properties that are inside the municipal boundary, staff can comment on who else has schmoo zoning there or not, because of the future development potential around this property. I think it's important to be aware of that context.
Yeah, through the mayor or through the city manager to council. So there is a map on page 3 of the report that outlines the different zones, but pretty much the properties that are directly to the west of the subject property are all zoned small scale multi-unit. We also have some properties in the area that are also zoned R1A, and yeah, which is the larger lot residential. But those properties, as a part of the, we potentially expect them to be applying for higher density development as well.
Excellent. Thanks for providing that clarity. It's much appreciated. I'll just maybe give an update. So next I have Councillor Frisch, then Councillor Hillian, Councillor Cole-Hamilton, Councillor Morin, and then Councillor Jolicoeur. So with that, I'll pass it over to Councillor. Oh, some of the lights turned off. I'll pass it over to Councillor Frisch.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Certainly in the Arden Corridor local area plan, it does outline cluster housing, especially near the school, which I'm sure you guys were following when this came through. But I wanted to ask the proponent if he had considered doing something lower density and if they had looked at the economic viability of that. I know it also outlines single family houses and carriage houses and so on.
Yeah, thanks for the question. Well, I guess I can excuse myself from the question to some degree by just how difficult the development market is in general right now. That's very hard to come to the table with a viable proposal. I think that, you know, if and when a single family might be viable here, it would be required to meet some upper end of the market. You know, you'd be looking at large luxury homes, maybe a similar footprint as well. So what we tried to do here was speak directly to your OCP and LAP and housing needs policies and you know, the provincial legislation, and go with something that can actually also meet the environmental goals. So I don't know if that quite answers your question, but that's kind of my roundabout way of answering it.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
And next we have Councillor Hillian.
Thanks, Mayor. I want to follow up on Councillor McCollum's point about water, which our city manager spoke to a certain extent. The ditches seem to currently be a problem in the area. In speaking to some of the people who live there in that neighborhood, they report regularly in peak rainy season having those ditches full to overflowing. They also report clearing them out themselves on occasion of debris that has accumulated, you know, fallen branches, all that sort of thing that is clogging up the ditches. And one or two people suggested that the ditches get filled to the extent that it is potentially a safety hazard. So, and they also talked about experiencing flooding in their own homes as a result of some of the changes that have taken place to the lot over the years. The area in section 1 in the conceptual site plan, I understand, was actually had fill added to it back in the 90s before this property came into the city. And, you know, I do think one of the positive aspects of this plan is the restoration that would take place there. But apparently those types of changes, residents report to have impacted where the water is able to go. And thus the concerns we're hearing about a decrease in permeability and as the site is built on. So I did want to get just some more confirmation, and perhaps it's the engineering department or the city manager reiterating what we can expect in terms of managing water, and whether we can actually potentially see an improvement of the situation that local residents are already experiencing, so that flooding will decrease and those ditches will in fact either be replaced or at least managed more effectively.
Ms. Gothard.
All right, thank you for the question. Yeah, this staff definitely were, I guess, aware of how much water is a formative system in this particular neighborhood. What's really interesting about the lands within the city's jurisdiction is that they are nearly entirely encircled by electoral area lands. Just to clarify how drainage is managed in the electoral unincorporated areas, it is a function of the Ministry of Transportation and Transit through their subdivision approving functions and management of roads. So, you know, I think what we're seeing is the fact that there's probably some cumulative impact happening from outside the city's boundaries here. That's something certainly, you know, I know, and I don't want to speak too much for my colleague, Kyle Shaw, et cetera, who would be working with the regional district more on this kind of topic, but just, you know, that kind of dialogue happens across jurisdictional boundaries, I guess I want to recognize is what I'm saying. In terms of the actual assets, the ditches, the roads that are the city. So there is actually Lake Trail Road that goes just a little bit past Salisbury Place that is the city's. That's, I think what I'm hearing some comment around service level management, et cetera. People are feeling they need to get in there and be doing some work themselves. So I suppose just from my own department's perspective, we can take notes and communicate that back to the departments that work on maintaining those assets and get better understanding of their level of service. Oh, I'm forgetting a final point, actually, that my colleague is reminding me, is that the subdivision development servicing bylaw will regulate the drainage. So when I use the drainage, I'm referring to both rain and stormwater management from this particular property. And so really, I think that's the topic really before us actually is the material point is this file, which is the fact that that subdivision development servicing bylaw does have standards in it to manage flows flowing off this property to be aligned with pre-development flows so that there is not cumulative impact from development downstream on those other properties. So again, back to my first comment is more that I think what we're seeing is a cumulative impact of many properties and how drainage is being managed outside the city's boundary.
And Mr. Garbutt's got a comment as
Yeah,
well.
thank you, Mayor. Just I currently hold two hats with the approving officer function. I just want to remind council, Mr. Davidson and Ms. Tazioli are not here today, but we introduced an integrated rainwater master plan process, and council was made aware of the fact that because of the suburban development that encircles the city and the electoral areas and the lack of controls and authorities that they have related to drainage management, but also tree removal, hazard protection. There are authorities that we have as a municipality that are not available to the electoral areas. It is extremely challenging to manage drainage inside this shared watershed when we have interjurisdictional movement. The regional growth strategy does actually speak to the electoral areas taking on drainage management. It's in a significant area in environmental management there. And so we have received commentary from electoral area referrals about drainage management, and likewise, we've shared those concerns. So in an integrated watershed, it's imperative that through our development approvals, we need to manage downstream flows, but it is actually very challenging because our developers inside our municipal boundary receive stormwater and overland drainage from a jurisdiction that's unregulated. So we really, it's something that in the development approval process, we take extremely seriously. And the applicant has provided information and will continue to provide that in accordance with both development permit requirements and through the subdivision approval process. Ultimately, there is liability if we cause issues downstream. And so that drives the city's approvals. Very often we hear from developers that our requirements to manage these drainage issues are onerous, et cetera, but it's a critical component. And I appreciate the questions around drainage because these areas and then the edge in area B in East Courtenay also has these same issues, came up in the land files, et cetera. So something that we are very focused on, and our colleagues in the Ms. Tazioli's area are leading the way on their IRMP.
Excellent. Definitely a team effort. Thanks for everybody for providing all that context. It's very much appreciated. Next, we have Councillor Cole Hamilton, then Councillor Moore, and Councillor Jolicoeur. So Councillor Cole Hamilton.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. My question was also on drainage, and it may not necessarily be necessary at this point, but just to kind of draw kind of a fine point on this before approving rezoning, we're being asked to do that with a note that drainage will be addressed at the development permit stage. And I was wondering if staff could just speak in a fairly brief fashion to the concerns that are out there and my own question as to how confident we are that can and will be addressed if we choose to rezone pending that.
All right, let me get your mic on there. Ms. Gothard.
Yeah, thank you for the question. So as part of the rezoning proposal, there is a servicing memo that was provided by professional engineer. I don't think it actually formed part of the attachments. To be honest, there's other documents that go into an analysis submission for an application rezoning. So you do not see all of the documents, but it met our submission requirements, and in it their engineers and our own engineers reviewed those and could see that the proof of concept can work for both the drainage and actually also the servicing of the water and the sanitary as well. And so some of those things that'll be regulated through the development permit is some of the location of some of those features. It's such as detention features, whether it's tank or otherwise. I think tank is what's actually proposed. And then the use of landscaping and just how much of that landscaping can actually absorb some of that water, and so that an engineering solution is not required. So it's just kind of working through the details to finalize and proof out the concept that's already been provided, which is appropriate at the rezoning stage, the conceptual level. I hope that's answered the question.
That's helpful. Thanks, Nancy. Yeah.
Excellent. Thanks, Councillor Cole Hamilton. And then we have Councillor Warren.
Great, thanks, Mayor. Yeah, thanks for all the questions from my colleagues around the water issues. I also went and took a walk through and talked to the residents and about their concerns. And I mean, I think we need to find ways to make this better for the residents, not make the problem worse for them, because they're in a unique situation where they're in this little skinny strip that's been plunked in the middle of the city boundary. And we've already heard from another development not long ago, and there seems to be more and more of these that are either right on the edge of beside the electoral area, or they're these funny little, there's the Copperfield and there's these other little strips of property that's just surrounded by electoral area. And I think that's where a lot of the angst comes in. So my question is, I guess, a little bit more of a regional type question in terms of those surrounding area that's in the RD is a settlement expansion as far as I know. And I guess I'm wondering, because I know you've been obviously talking to colleagues, and the regional growth strategy is aging a little bit now, and it will probably get looked at in the next few years. So what do you anticipate happening in that surrounding area, and in what timeline? I guess what I'm thinking is this is coming up sooner than maybe people would like who are in that area, but I'm thinking also maybe their landscape's going to change relatively soon despite this. I also wanted to just throw in that I think the density is I don't have a huge issue with the density at all. I mean, I lived in a townhouse complex right in the middle of, with other single family homes and things, and it fit in. I think there's lots of ways for it to fit in nicely to the neighborhood, but I am more concerned about the water issues, and also just that the impact on rural neighbors. So if you wouldn't mind answering that, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the question through the mayor. Yes, speaking to the regional growth strategy, you are correct, Councillor Morin. This area is identified in a settlement expansion area. For people's reminder, that just means that land is earmarked in the regional growth strategy plan for municipal boundary extension. We are the jurisdiction that's the most adjacent to it, so it is the city of Courtenay that would take that in one day. Now, in terms of the timing for that, the OCP that was just updated recognized that we do not need to do any boundary extensions anytime soon. When the next 5-year review cycle happens for our particular OCP, we will always be monitoring whether boundary extension is appropriate. There are other areas within the city that might make more sense for boundary extension before others. Boundary extension should not be taken lightly. As the city manager mentioned, when we inherit all these assets, there's all these other implications that go with it. And there's quite a provincial process that goes with that too. So I guess this is a question people ask staff very, very frequently. People generally want to come into the city, to be honest, is how quickly is this going to happen? And we have to give a very similar answer to what I'm giving right now. When a boundary extension eventually is ever contemplated, wherever that may be, it has a strict set of, I think it's 2 pages of process guidance and policy guidance in the OCP on all that evaluation that needs to occur before that can occur. I'll also just say, in terms of the regional growth strategy and its review cycle, that it is projected, it's scheduled for a major review within the next 5 years, and just to provide that fact there.
Potentially. I've got Councillor Jolicoeur, and I also have Councillor Hillian and Cole Hamilton online. If you like, we'll call it a follow-up. How's that sound?
Just the other thing that was brought up was around light pollution, and that the RD has a dark sky bylaw. So I'm just curious how that works when, again, it's this little tiny area with all these rural properties that are used to the dark sky bylaw, and how do we mitigate that issue for people?
Through the mayor to council. So we do have, we would regulate that through our development permit, and our development permit does require full cutoff lighting. So lighting has to be faced downwards. So yeah, that's the typical way that we do that, and it's a fairly standard process now with new developments to have that type of lighting.
All right, thanks, Councillor Morin. And next we have Councillor Jolicoeur, then Councillor Hillian, and then Councillor Frisch.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I just wanted to follow up on some of the comments in response to Councillor McCollum's question around the ditch, but also around the type of road standards. So we have the multi-use path that goes up to Webb, and then there are 3 parcels, and then this parcel. So it's actually quite a short distance from Webb to this parcel. And so I guess I'm wanting clarification through the approval process that the city manager laid out. There is an opportunity to secure either funds or through the development that the developer actually puts in the road standards for that type of road. And I guess what I'm curious around, is that a sidewalk? Is that a multi-use path? What is that? What does that look like? And the reason I ask, because that would, it would be a standalone piece for the frontage. But then for us as a city, we're looking at just 3 parcels to connect a very long extended project that we're just completing. So that's the reason I'm asking.
Mr. Garb?
Yeah, thank you through the mayor to Councillor Jolicoeur. I think staff are going to need to report back on what those frontage requirements would be, because again, it's typically a condition of subdivision, because we don't have updated policies right now attempting to require that. So municipalities can require improvements up to and including the center line of the adjacent road for the frontage in front there. And we have an evolving standard. So the applicant is online. I think between whatever direction council gives, we'll make sure that that's included in the next steps to council. Because I'm hearing council wants to trying to enhance the safe mobility along that frontage. Inside the view that we have in front of us right now shows 2 properties, I believe, and they will have future development potential as well. So through my colleagues in the planning department, and you'll have a new director next week, that will work through this and can report back based on whatever council direction gives. But that'll be a topic I would anticipate being included.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Jolicoeur and Councillor Hillian.
Thanks, Mayor. I just want to clarify, I've been trying to reread some of the material that came in. We've had a number of submissions that just arrived today. Yeah, so it's been difficult to digest all of them, but there were comments in one of the public submissions that there's not much in the way of public benefit from this development. I do think Councillor McCollum may have mentioned this earlier, but I want to clarify once again. Am I correct in my understanding that the area, the environmentally sensitive area identified as number 1 on the site, which has been filled in substantially, is reference to chunks of concrete, invasive species, that effectively is going to be restored to something closely resembling its natural condition, which is a substantial benefit. Can we just confirm that for the record, please?
Through the mayor to council. So that will be, yes, that will be restored, but at the environmental development permit stage.
Okay. And then we had another message which expressed a lot of concern about the Morrison Creek lamprey. And I know you made reference to this earlier on. It's noted in the report. But can you just, for the record, clarify the connection between Arden Creek and Morrison Creek, and how the Morrison Creek lamprey could potentially be impacted by this development, and what whether the protections that are planned assure that that there is no impact on that endangered species.
Ms. Gothard.
Yeah, thank you for the question. So Arden Creek is a tributary, which means it flows into Morrison Creek, where the Morrison Creek lamprey lives and only lives. And so it is again, federally protected species at risk act species. I can't remember how many years ago, was it 5 or 6, the DFO responsible for these recovery plans identified what they call the critical habitat areas. And it was quite helpful, because they actually established determined setbacks for all of the watershed that then flows into where the actual lamprey are. You would not find lamprey in these ditches and where this kind of grassy substrate is in these creek up here, but you would as you get closer down towards Puntledge River. And so I guess I just want to confirm that indeed staff reviewed the critical habitat requirements from DFO. The registered biologist who's retained by the applicant consulted all those materials as well and confirmed that as a setback, and then it does meet the provincial setback as well. So I hope I hope that's enough information, but please let me know if it's not.
Thanks. Do I have time for one more, Mr. Mayor?
Okay, we've got a couple lights on in here, so a
Sure.
quick one.
Well, the question will be quick. I don't know if the answer will. It has been referenced by staff, the Arden local area plan. I know we have at least one planner here today who worked quite extensively on that plan. And I know when it was completed, it was a high point in planning in the city of Courtenay, greeted with wide acclaim. And I think that in part explains why we have quite a number of residents who are responding to this development proposal with concern about how that plan is perhaps not being followed, or and I think they're obviously concerned about further development of this scale in these areas. So I'm just wondering if again we can hear about the integrity of the Arden local area plan, and how we restore some confidence in our residents that planning processes like that have such wide public participation are respected by the city as conditions change.
Yeah, I'm happy to provide some context there through the mayor. Thank you. Staff certainly have, well, of course, we review the Arden plan as part of the application, but I was just thinking about this myself, having been part of the LAP process in 2012. The origins of that Arden local area plan were in part to recognize that one day the surrounding lands would come into the city. So even 14 years ago, we were already still talking about the regional district lands coming into city and wanting to set a bit of a vision and a coherence to what people might expect. Since that time, you'll hear our department talk about Bill 44 over and over and over again, and just that provincial direction to look for all opportunities to try and provide development housing in lands that can be developed. And so these are lands there are lands on this property that can be developed, and I think some various councillors, staff have observed the location is actually meeting very explicitly one of the policies, which is to have multi-residential homes near the school, family-oriented. These ones are mostly expected to be 2 and 3 bedrooms, and actually filling a need that we don't have a lot of. I appreciate there's certain images in the local area plan that are conceptual, and as staff, we understand how to use them as conceptual tools. I understand as a communication tool, people might look at them and see definitive answers in those conceptual plans, but indeed as a planning tool, they are conceptual. What ultimately dictates what is supportable in the zone is the official community plan land use designation. And so that land use designation is codified in the city's official community plan land use designation map. And so that one does have this designated as urban residential. This area has been urban residential since 2022, at least that OCP. And I guess just kind of circling back to the Bill 44 part in the housing direction there was just that in modifying certain things in our urban residential land use designations, we recognize that the era of single residential homes no longer exists. We're not actually even allowed to plan for single residential homes. So inherently, we are talking about urban residential, which is meant to mean our neighborhoods, whether existing or future, are ones that have more density. And if we want to go back to the density that is signaled in the local area plan, I just was kind of running the math on page 245 of the local area plan. So it's 245 of the official community plan, but that the LAP is inside the OCP. So when I say page 245, I'm drawing your attention to page 245 of the OCP. There's images, there's guidance in there to say the types of development, the community can expect and staff can review to understand whether to support or not. And there's a number cited a few times, which is 12 units per acre. There's a few images in triplex form, for instance, just to put that in the context of this particular development. This development is proposing 30 units. I mean, the applicant said maybe it'll actually be fewer. Given that this this parcel is nearly 3 acres. The actual Arden plan is suggesting you could have densities up to, you know, in the kind of 30 range as is. Actually, I found it almost almost convenient just exactly how well that math worked out. So one thing I will say about this proposal is that it is, by nature of it being a single strata development with a single driveway, that is different than if it was proposed to be subdivided into many small lots, each with their own driveway and the impact on the road there. And so, you know, I just actually found that even interesting as I was looking in the Arden local area plan. I was thinking, okay, so, you know, the density of 12 units per acre in triplex form, that's generally subdivided lots in triplex form. It would actually, I mean, in many ways could feel even more imposing than what you see is this more cluster form with the one driveway. So I guess all that to say, you know, staff feel the integrity of the local area plan is being met in its vision. And that also at the same time, Bill 44 brought in a new set of directions on what is expected in urban residential areas. And we communicate this as much as we can to the public, is that kind of the era of just single residential is not an era in BC anymore.
Thanks very much.
Excellent, much appreciated. And we are on to Councillor Frisch.
Thanks again, Mayor. I have two questions about servicing infrastructure, and in the report, I'll start with storm and rainwater. It mentions a storage tank to be drained into the city's system at high flow peak periods. I guess it would be actually discharged at low peak periods after filling up at high peak flows. Does that make more sense than discharging the water into the natural environment? And what does staff have any thoughts on that?
All right, one second.
So to clarify, just Councillor Frisch's question, you're referring to page 7, is that correct? In the paragraph on servicing infrastructure? Yeah, okay, that's great. Yeah.
And maybe it's not a question, I don't know if you've thought about it, if it's just standard. I guess you're collecting roof rainwater runoff and from the parking areas, I would assume that's the intention. And I don't know if that should be dumped into the natural environment. I'm wondering if we have any policy on that or thoughts on that water.
Yeah, I guess I can clarify that now we're kind of venturing into the terrain of engineering coefficients and types of analyses that they would do. So, I mean, there's certainly standards to make sure water quality and quantity are not negatively impacting the natural environment. So I must recognize I myself am not a professional engineer, and I won't get into those details. It wouldn't be appropriate, but there are standards in place, I guess.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll just move on then to maybe a larger question about this being one development of potentially another one or two of its size, based on what you've told me about that area and how it's zoned and what can be expected. So do we have water, like, I guess, sewer capacity and stormwater capacity for similar developments on either side of it? Or are these guys kind of like, they'll get in, but the other two areas might not?
Yes, through the mayor to council, we can't speak to the other properties. I know that our engineering department did do an internal review and a desktop review, and they've decided that there's enough capacity to go forward with a rezoning. That being said, they're still going to have to do some modeling, downstream modeling at the development permit stage, but that's only related to this property. We haven't looked at adjacent properties.
Right. Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Frisch and Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I mean, something that the proponent talked about was if you go with lower density, then you're really bumping up the price of those homes. And we know that, this is, you know, nothing's really affordable anymore. But townhomes would be definitely somewhat less expensive than a larger luxury type home. So that's one thing. I did want to bring up the salmon piece when I was out on the property. There was a lot of talk about all the salmon that are in that area and in the creek and even in some of the ditches at times. And the residents in that area actually, um, saving the salmon basically. And I know it does say in the report that there will be specific measures taken to safeguard the fish bearing creek during construction. Excuse me, I'm wondering if that sort of restoration or stream keeping piece will, excuse me, excuse me, will be part of that kind of restoration, and what can we expect safeguard the creek to mean? Because we know obviously that construction can have a big impact on all wildlife. And I guess I just wanted to bring up that I brought this up during another conversation, that the people that live in the area often see far more than we see in terms of what's happening with wildlife, fish. Someone can go out there on a certain day and not see any owls or fish or anything else, but the people who live in that area, are stewarding that area. I mean, it was quite remarkable to hear about all the things that the residents are doing there to protect the wildlife and salmon. So yeah, just curious about what that would look like in terms of safeguarding that creek. Thanks.
And you can probably leave your mic on because you keep getting pulled in, but Ms. Goddard, I'll give the floor back to you.
All right, thank you. So questions on safeguarding the creek through the processes the city has available. So first of all, the option before council is these permanent legal protection of the covenant. So that's just clear. It lives on title forever. Any other property owner is very clear on where they can develop, where they cannot develop, and like I mentioned before, as well, just maintenance expectations as well, so that it's proactive in the site is not left to, for instance, be overcome by invasive species. Then if it proceeded through the environmental development permit process, that's where finer details are determined on what exactly does that restoration look like. Securities are taken for that restoration. Often there's always actually a restoration monitoring period. So just making sure what went in there actually is performing as intended. And city takes securities for that as well. And then once that permitting process has been issued, then when you're actually developing the actual site, the city requires what's called a construction environmental management plan. So it shows that the proponent, working with the biologists and the engineering team and any other consultants on the property, are understanding how to manage erosion control, are making decisions around timing, even sometimes timing of removal, maybe to be more sensitive to, if there's a nesting birds, the nesting scan is all part of this too, I should mention. And then there's temporary fencing of the environmentally sensitive areas. And then in this case, the covenant would require permanent fencing, and it would require also educational signage on it. Now, this is not public land, so it's signage really for the residents there. And, in the past, the city's worked with stream keepers to kind of develop signage, what's the right message? Is there, maybe some messaging to get for people to get involved with local stream keepers? That I'll just outline the city's process. If the proponent wants to add anything to that, they're welcome to. I don't know if they do have anything to add.
No, that's great. Yeah, we'll be beholden to the recommendations in the environmental report, including a construction environmental management plan to manage impacts during construction. So thank you.
Excellent. Thanks for that. Let's see if you have to turn your microphone back on again, but I'll pass over to Councillor Gilles.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Just a final comment on the affordable housing. We haven't spent too much time on that. On page 8 of the staff report, I think this is the first time we're seeing an application come through that's in stream, and staff does a really, I think, great job of clarifying the two options ahead of us and what will happen depending on if ACCs apply or not. So is this because we're going to potentially be seeing a few of these come through where we're in an in-between space? And the last paragraph on that page speaks to the legal templates. And I imagine that if there are other proponents, other applications coming forward in a similar situation, so that is a policy of the city, that the legal work is done by the proponent and not by the city to establish one or both options. That's my first question. And then, or my only question, and just before I pass it over, my comment is, this is, I think, another example of guess my comments similar to a few weeks ago around the affordable housing piece is that I think it might be good for us to consider our affordable housing policies within the OCP. And staff do articulate this is a smaller development, and so that 15% goal not really applicable due to the economics of it all. But I think we're kind of in this place where we continue to see applications come forward that aren't necessarily meeting what we have in policy. And so I just want to kind of name that, and it might be time for us to review that as a council, because we're putting it out there that this is our policy, but almost every application we have come forward isn't meeting every specific piece, which we can all have opinions on, but I just wanted to comment on that as well. And maybe the question around the legal piece. Yeah.
Ms. Gothard.
Yeah, thank you for the question. So that's about the legal documentation to secure a housing agreement and bylaw as described. If the way staff work is we have various legal templates by our own solicitors. We provide those to applicants. And then generally there's a review process that happens between city's lawyer and applicant's lawyer. And that is always covered by the applicant. That's in our procedures bylaw. In this case, we don't have a template for this particular legal arrangement. So so yes, so we're the applicant, we're working with the applicant. They would be covering those costs to generate the applicant the template, and then go through that standard kind of little bit of back and forth between the lawyers. And then just clarifying also, well, I guess I'll just comment on the part about the 15% of units policy for affordable through rezonings. Just recognizing that is a policy that from the old OCP that is applying. Yes, we're still working on how to use it in stream applications, but any new application would not be subject to that particular policy.
Excellent. Councillor Frisch.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Is it okay to make a comment at this time? I know Councillor McCollum's. Yeah, I'll just make some comments if that's okay. So I definitely see some challenges around the development, but I also see a lot of benefits, and I just want to acknowledge that it looks like staff and the proponent are doing their best to be creative and stick to our OCP and the local area plan for that area. I am impressed with the attention to the environmentally sensitive habitat and the affordable housing considerations, and of course, the Arden Corridor LAP in particular. So I'm inclined to support the staff recommendation, but I'll hold off if Councillor McCollum has more to add. Or maybe just on that note, yeah, I want to say thanks again and move the recommendation.
All right, it's been moved and seconded, and again, I think big kudos to staff and the developer for finding that very, very delicate balance, trying to move this project forward, which I think has been articulated by many of the comments tonight. And with that, all those in favor? Any opposed? And motion carries. And now we'll move on to zoning amendment bylaw 3226 for 2535 Cumberland Road. And I will pass it over to Mike, I believe. Mr. Grimsrud?
Yeah, are we on?
You are.
Okay. Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'd like to briefly introduce zoning amendment bylaw number 3226 for 2535 Cumberland Road, which is before you for first, second, and third readings. The proposal is to rezone a roughly 7,000 square meter property located on Cumberland Road, just south of the Copperfield subdivision and Arden Road, from residential 1A, which has the 1 hectare minimum lot size, to residential small scale multi-unit housing for a proposed Bearland Strata duplex development, consistent with the OCP's urban residential land use designation. The generally flat property has been cleared since before joining the city and has been storing materials and vehicles behind a single house with 2 direct driveway accesses to Cumberland Road. There's a wetland along the southern border. It's not detailed here, but you may have seen a previous application. Helping to qualify it as a stream, as it connects to the ditch along Cumberland Road, which is the piped downstream of the subject property for about 200 meters before joining the Piercy Creek main stem. The project has obtained provincial riparian areas protection regulation permission and has applied for an environmental development permit, as well as form and character development permit, development variance permit, and subdivision. The concept plan includes 6 duplexes straddling 12 Bearland straddle lots with a shared road, pergola, and visitor and mailbox parking. Each side of the duplex is on its own straddle lot and is configured to have a semi-basement suite. The concept could total up to 24 units, each with separate outdoor spaces that meet usable open space requirements. The potential 1-bedroom suites under the 3-bedroom duplex units provide mortgage help and rental housing. The applicant proposes community amenity contributions per net new lot that meet the target in the previous OCP if amenity contribution charges do not apply. And this will depend on the timing of subdivision completion and building permit issuance. Road dedication, frontage improvements, and 5% cash in lieu parkland dedication will be required for subdivision. Driveways and invasive species are removed along Cumberland Drive, and a cedar hedge is installed to shade the stream. The southern wetlands buffer on the property is fenced and planted with native trees and shrubs, and the developable area is treed and landscaped. A community information meeting was held this past April with public comment topics including transportation, environmental, housing form, construction, sales, and servicing. Overall reception included some concern about wider development in the area, but was generally neutral to the subject development. And there were no written comments save that one that was recently added to the agenda. Staff recommend giving first, second, and third reading to zoning amendment bylaw number 3226. Thank you for your attention, and I'm available to answer any questions. Also, the applicant is here, and this is Jared Renkema over here, and I think Gary might be available online also.
I think Gary is not available.
Okay.
Right. Yeah, oh, is he online? Okay, all right. Perfect. Awesome. Are there any questions or comments from council? Councillor McCollum.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Just a question, yeah, again, about the interface between the main road. I understand that the access is going to be through Swanson, but of course this lot is impacted by more than one connection, and you know, it's clear that it won't be connected through to the road. However, much like my question during the last item on the agenda, there is planting that's going to happen along the ditch, and which I guess is technically a stream. I just learned in this report. And Cumberland Road is a well-used road with a shoulder that we kind of have painted or consideration for a bike lane, but there's no sidewalk there. And then adjacent to this development is another proposed development for many more units. And again, if that development proceeds, I would really hope that we would see you know, something along Cumberland Road that's not a shoulder. And so I just want some clarity on how we imagine these two developments impacting that road use. I recognize that even closer into town, we also have in some areas just a shoulder, but on the backside of you know, kind of more recent townhouses that were developed, there is a sidewalk, and I assume that sidewalk was probably constructed around the same time that development went in, and probably as part of it, but that certainly predates my time on council. So yeah, just want to really understand how you know, the proposed changes in this area are going to improve connectivity for that strip of Cumberland Road.
Thank you. Through Mayor to Council. That's a really great question about what needs to happen along Cumberland there. So there's a couple of things on this property. One, on the subject property, they're planting the hedge, which would be helpful for privacy and also has environmental benefits, assuming that that stream stays. That is technically a stream, it's wrapper protected, and as far as the development is concerned, they're required to protect and improve it. They'd be improving it. Also, they will be, I think it's 2.5 meters of road frontage they're going to give. So what you see on this design here, that's actually, you know, where the hedges are planted. That's actually in about 2.5 meters from where the original property line currently is. But what exactly long-term happens with that ditch stream doesn't technically qualify as a water course under our zoning bylaw, but it meets the stream definition. Normally they would be required to do or pay for the upgrades to meet the road standard, which there is an arterial road standard, and it our current arterial road standard in our SDS bylaw, it has sidewalks. So the expectation would be that's what would be required. That during the subdivision process, there may be some additional discussions as what can happen with the stream and if there should be anything different than the standard as it currently is. If there's any way to not pipe it, I mean it's piped just downstream for 200 meters. Maybe it makes more sense ultimately to do that as that road section is improved. That's not really finally determined at this point, but they would be required to do through the works and services agreement at subdivision. They would be required to meet the standard that we set.
Okay, I think that does answer my question, that there's details to be determined because the stream creates some complexities there, but there is a requirement for a sidewalk along Cumberland Road in one form or another. Is that what you're saying?
Through the chair, I believe that is what we're saying is that these details will be determined. We're the planners, the engineers ultimately will determine what the standard is, what will have to be required, the works and services agreement, the subdivision agreement, all of those things will take those details into consideration and will follow what engineering directs.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense to me, and that I just some with these rezonings, I'm never sure if what the standard that needs to be met are the roads within the development or if these adjacent roads that don't necessarily have, you know, the development connection going through are still impacted. And I think your answer clarifies that for me. So I'm satisfied with that. Thanks.
Great, thanks, Councillor McCullum and Councillor Hillian.
Thanks, Mayor. Yeah, I know there was some reference in the public feedback to, you know, concern about this in concert with the other proposed development further up. You know, there are practical issues that come up with all of these proposed developments, but I'm going to share a little bit of personal information. My son and his partner have just moved into a neighborhood not far from here. And you know what is actually going on here is that we're creating a lot of very livable neighborhoods in this community, and there are a lot of people who want to live in this area. It's a wonderful community to live in, despite some of the negative comments we get from some folks out there in cyberspace. And I think this is another one of those proposals that will create a very livable area for people to raise families, to participate in the life of the community, and to care about the neighborhood that they live in and add value to our community in general. I know there's a concern that you know, we see the community changing, we see some loss of habitat, and we have concerns about water and transportation and all those issues. Those are problems that need to be solved because it's a good place to live. And I think that's something that we need to bear in mind as we look at these various proposals. And I just want to give credit to people like Mr. Renkema for making these opportunities possible for young families and the people who would like to live in these neighborhoods.
Excellent. Thanks very much, Councillor Hillian. And I don't see any, I do now, Councillor Moore.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Yeah, I would agree with that for sure. Although I had concerns about the property next door, this is significantly different. It's also, you know, that lot or that property has sat vacant for a long time. And it'll be nice to see some homes there. It is a beautiful neighborhood. I'm very biased. It's my hood, my old hood growing up, as well as into my adulthood. So yeah, I'm happy to support this going forward. Thank you.
Thanks. Second. Okay, it's been moved and seconded. And again, I think it's another good articulation of that balance that developers and staff are working together to really try to fulfill that OCP. So much appreciated. Gary, my apologies. Jared was very clear you were going to be here, but that was a couple hours ago. And for some reason, it dissipated from my brain, but thanks for joining us today and for giving us all your great advice. It's much appreciated. With that, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? And motion carries. All right, moving on to 9.2.2, Development Cost Charges Reserve Fund Amendment Bylaw number 3228, and Amenity Cost Charges ACC Reserve Fund Establishment Bylaw 3229. And with that, I will pass it over to Mr. Langemeyer.
Nice to be here once again. Before you have amendment bylaw for a DCC reserve, and this comes on the tail of the recently adopted development cost charge bylaw. Along with that, we have the new AECC bylaw. And with that, we need a matching reserve, statutory reserve for that bylaw. So there's a new reserve. And we'll also, if council chooses to adopt these bylaws, we'll see an update to our new reserve policy because of this work. Both these bylaws are statutory. We must create them. And with that, I'm open to any questions.
Fantastic. Thanks very much. Starting with Councillor McCollum.
Yeah, thanks. I don't really have a question on this. It's straightforward housekeeping, and I'm happy to see it come forward. But I did have a question around housekeeping, just looking, and I meant to ask it during the reserve policy discussion, but this is an appropriate time as well. There was a lot of bylaws that had to be pulled and looked through. I think there was maybe 37 pages of reserve bylaws in the reserve policy, and it made me wonder if is there a way to do housekeeping to consolidate them so that it's not so confusing? I don't know how much staff time went into just simply finding the you know, all of the relevant bylaws related to reserves, but is that common practice that it does sit as many different bylaws in most municipalities?
Some municipalities will have one reserve establishment bylaw and then amend it. We have the approach of our reserve establishment bylaws are quite sporadic in adoption, so they kind of come up one-off. The policy that council recently adopted is kind of that tool that brings it all together, and it makes it so it's easier to understand in one consolidated place. So I don't see a great benefit to redoing how our reserves are established by bylaw. It works. Our bylaws are easy to track and are easy to find, and we have the policy to back it up.
Okay, that makes sense. Thanks.
Excellent. That was going to be my question. So fantastic. Recommendation 1 has been moved and seconded. Any further questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Anyone opposed? And motion carries. Excellent. Two's been moved and seconded. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? And motion carries. All right, moving on to the temporary boring bylaw 3231 of 2026 for the 6th Street Bridge. And I believe Mr. Langemeier.
Nice to be here once again. The bylaw before you is a temporary borrowing bylaw on an existing loan authorization bylaws adopted by council. The temporary borrowing bylaw allows the municipality to access funding similar to a line of credit to fund the construction of the 6th Street Bridge. It does not tie us to a specific long-term loan amount. Once the project is complete, staff will return with recommendations for taking either of the long-term loan authorization bylaws to actually the fixed 20, 30, 15-year amortization as council wishes. I do want to highlight here that with the adoption of the new DCC bylaw and the changes to the transportation section, the 6th Street Bridge project is an eligible DCC project, and there are some funds that can go towards that. This is new information that wasn't available during the 26th through 2030 financial planning process, and that's why we didn't see it in that financial plan. So at the end of the project, when I bring back the loan authorization bylaws to go to long-term, I will also make recommendations for this new funding source.
And you're available for any questions or comments, so appreciate that. I don't see any just yet. Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor? Any opposed? And motion carries. And we'll move into adoption for fees and judgment, fees and charges amendment bylaw 3220. And park bench. I mean, this is for adoption. I think we're pretty clear on what it is. Been moved and seconded. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? And motion carries. That gets us into council reports, starting with Councillor Jolicoeur, Councillor McCollum, Councillor Cole-Hamilton, Councillor Frisch, Councillor Morin, Councillor Hillian.
Pass, thanks.
All right, I'll maybe just mention a couple of things. Some councillors attended FCM, the Federation of Canadian Municipalities conferences last week, where a lot of great things were learned. Really appreciated that. And then two relatively significant things today. I did attend the early learning center today and tomorrow center at Vanier, grand opening, amazing new facility. Also the Go by Bike week celebration stations, I got to visit some of those, which was great, and also did the Alzheimer's walk. And with that, we are adjourned.